welcome to Backwards Blue Hat Tuesday here on the Tip-Off, the show that sets the stage for all the most important news, daily fantasy plays, and bets on tonight's 6-game NBA slate. I am your host, Kayla Knierim. Joining me today, we have Eric Lindquist and Chris Spags. Look at all of us twinning today, tripleting today.
I love Spags's "oh no" when he logged onto Zoom today. It was lovely, and then Kayla's like, "Oh, here." She reaches behind, grabs a blue hat, had it at the ready. It was meant to be.
I'm honestly happier that Kayla got the blue hat now, because if it were just Eric wearing the blue hat and me wearing the blue hat, I would have felt honestly a lot like an Office episode where I would be the Michael Scott, Eric clearly the Dwight. And I think that there's a lot of things here that just made me uncomfortable, but happy to be here today. Happy to be back on the Tip-Off and a 6-game slate. What could possibly go wrong?
Making fun of me. We're back. We're back to old times. This is exactly what I expected. Thanks. How am I Dwight Schrute? How?
Eric, all I can say, there's never been a better time in America.
Absolutely an Andy Bernard.
Who am
I? Let's see. I mean, it's a coin flip. I would say. I mean, you could go the Pam route, but who's the redhead from Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt?
Ellie Kemper. What's her name on the show?
I couldn't remember her name for a second, but absolutely Ellie Kemper. Absolutely.
Erin, thank you.
Yeah,
she changed it because she had the same name as someone else.
Breaking the fourth wall early in the show. Love it.
Spags, I was actually going to call you out because I saw yesterday that you were wearing a very jazzy jacket, and I was kind of sad that you never dress up for this show.
Well, because the money time bit now, I only do live before lock once a week. And there I brought this silly bit that came from just me buying money hats while on some sort of substances on Amazon one night. And then it became a bit where people liked it. People wanted to see it more. And then Kayla, you're a host. You've been doing this for a while. You got to give people what they want when they're asking for something. So then I leaned into it, then got to the point where I just end up torturing myself, then being like, I'm tired of the bit. And I had to reinvigorate myself by using it to torment Josh. Of course, Josh Eglin, everybody knows on this channel now, because he hates silly bits. He hates silly bits and fun more than anything. And I think that's really where you got to up your game. It's just always being more of an asshole.
Noted. I'll keep that in mind. I was going to ask if we're wearing these hats the whole time, but I guess now I have to, because I'm going to have like a red line across my forehead if I take this off. So we're with you for the whole hour, team. All right, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for countless hours of content on the NBA, NHL, PGA, MMA, NASCAR, and every other sport that's in season. We also want to talk about our sponsor, No House Advantage, who is taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes. This exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform levels the playing field and makes it easier for you to win real cash compared with your traditional DFS sites. The best part is you can join for free today. Just download the No House Advantage app and use promo code Awesemo to receive a first match deposit bonus of up to $20. Beat your friends, not the house. Win big with player props today. Before we get to our key news, let's talk those bad beats. Last night's slate had the usual twists and turns of late injuries and lineup changes. So how did it work out for you? Eric, we'll go to you first.
I'm a little disappointed. I ended up breaking even last night on both sites, which is kind of disappointing because whenever you get this flurry of news is kind of when I'm at my best. I was so excited going into it and I was recrunching. I got onto a ton of Sterling Brown on both sites, which worked out well. I was happy to hear Rinpack did the same thing, but I don't know. There was just such a path at 4,400 on DK. Point guard, him and Connaughton showed up late that I ended up plugging a bunch of in on FanDuel. But the thing I didn't really notice until it was too late was I ended up dropping like from 65% Drew on FanDuel to like 40%, which that enough when you have a guy go for 62 ended up kind of stopping me from having a lot of really, really good lineups, stopped me from kind of moving my way up. I would also say the overtime for Jaylen Brown getting there was a good thing for my Jaylen Brown exposure. But like Middleton in general with that blowout didn't quite get there. And they were pretty much my only two small forwards that I had in any quantities. I had near 100% of both of them on FanDuel. So ended up not being as good of a night as what I would expect under those conditions.
Yeah, I felt kind of the same way. Felt pretty good about my lineups. As I mentioned on Live Before Lock yesterday, whenever I'm doing a Live Before Lock show, I don't feel comfortable doing a 150 line tournament, especially on FanDuel recently, which I talked about on enough of the shows. I'm doing that more recently because I just think the profit margins make a little more sense. My results make a little more sense than investing the small car that you'd be buying on DraftKings on a given day with some of their larger tournaments recently. But I miss playing FanDuel. It's crazy how much things flip. And I think for me, it's really been an important part of the process where on FanDuel, you're playing so much less of the crappy value plays or speculative value plays. Whereas on DraftKings, if you don't get those right, you're normally not going to have a great day. You might not even be breaking even some days in NBA. So something to keep in mind, I think, especially these next few days of the trade deadline. But I know I'm excited to be doing the tip off because then the trickle down effect is I get to play more FanDuel. So really a win-win-win besides the blue cap thing, which I'm ashamed of the more and more I look down at my screen.
Well, honestly, it's because we're all united. And I don't think you know this because of yesterday. But Kayla, vehemently against Kansas Jayhawks. You vehemently positively for USC. What a day for both of you.
I'm so happy for us.
Stupid Greg was on the show going like, I'm going to bet on Kansas. And you know what? USC put it down on you, the biggest loss Kansas has ever had in a tournament. As it happens when you go with Greg Ehrenberg and his college picks, insulting my alma mater that I have a blanket of behind me. They're so rude, Kayla. I hated to see it, and I was happy for you to put it down on him and on behalf of Mizzou and USC, really, perhaps combining forces, a sort of Captain Planet type situation.
Yeah.
USC is my team now throughout the tournament. I'm all aboard the bandwagon.
Yeah, Iowa State having like their worst college basketball season of all time, and Kansas being their rival for college basketball. It was nice for me too, but not nearly as gratifying as it was for you two. I definitely know that.
I'm fully aboard. Yes, the USC train. Fight on. All right, let's get to our key news of the day. LeBron injured his ankle over the weekend and will join Anthony Davis on the sidelines for the Lakers. Who looks better against New Orleans with Los Angeles' 2 stars out tonight, Spags?
I think Montrezl Harrell is going to be the big beneficiary. Really, everybody for the Lakers is going to take a jump upwards in this spot because, LeBron, a gigantic usage guy, Anthony Davis, a gigantic usage guy and rebound guy. LeBron also assists a bunch. So really, to me, every Laker is going to be in play tonight. And I think the field's going to be with me on Montrezl Harrell based upon our ownership projections for DraftKings so far. But Kuzma certainly still in the mix. Schroeder, I think, benefits a good amount as well for him. Assist rate about 30% in the court time without LeBron, without AD. And Talen Horton-Tucker, America's favorite 3-named player in the NBA, I think, is a guy who's going to also benefit a good amount. Probably the most speculative play, and you are not getting him at the 3K value-ish range he's been in the past. But I think still, to me, popping up quite a bit. Awesemo's projection for him, 31 fantasy points at 5,500 on DK, I think looks really strong. So to me, you're not going to go wrong playing the Lakers unless New Orleans just completely smokes them tonight, Eric.
Yeah, and you had 28.6% usage, 34.2% usage for Talen Horton-Tucker those first 2 games. So a guy I'm definitely going to be getting to a little bit. I mean, where's this aggressive pricing, though, been the entire year on both sites? I mean, it seems like for whatever reason, they just kind of chose the Lakers to be the ones that they got priced up almost instantly. Some of these other pieces are just absurdly priced. Wes Matthews, who's not even like in the rotation. Well, he started and he's just not playing any kind of minutes or whatever, getting up to like 4,600. It's kind of absurd for some of these other pieces. I think it's pretty noticeably Montrezl Harrell at the top end, who's coming off consecutive double-doubles. Kyle Kuzma, we know the kind of potential that he has whenever LeBron and AD are off the floor, just completely spikes upsides. And then Talen Horton-Tucker, even at that 6K number over on FanDuel, which might make you a little bit queasy over on DraftKings, sitting at 5,500, I think he's still definitely in play, just purely a usage play where if those minutes get up to 28, 30 again, you're going to need him. The Pelicans, 28th in the NBA in defensive rating right now, a spot that you really want to be targeting night in, night out.
Steph Curry will be out again for Golden State, while James Wiseman and Eric Pascal are expected back from health protocols. Are Jordan Poole, not to be confused with Peel, and Andrew Wiggins a must-have on today's slate against Philadelphia, Eric?
So not to the must-own territory on Wiggins. Jordan Poole, yeah. I mean, it's kind of absurd looking at his numbers. So Andrew Wiggins, we kind of know who he is over the course of the year, 0.95. He had an absolute, or 0.95 DraftKings points per minute, just sitting a little bit above into that range. We saw the upside that he had 2 games ago. I absolutely understand from an upside perspective, but the ownership's going to be there in bulk. Jordan Poole, he's basically 1.14 DK points per minute with or without Curry on the floor over the course of this year. Only played 310 minutes, so we have a pretty small sample size on him for the season, 1.1 1.11 DKs points per minute. A guy that just like at the point guard position, you're getting a discount on a guy who out of the middle of nowhere is starting to play gigantic minutes for this team. 24.3% usage rate up against Memphis last time out, 19.9%, 3 consecutive games, points in the 20s. It's really, really hard to plug any holes in that play whatsoever. Whereas Wiggins, we know that he has upside, but he can just as easily burn you at this ownership.
I think the minutes are definitely going to be there for both guys because you're getting Pascal back, you're getting James Wiseman back, you're getting 2 big men, so that shouldn't really affect the guard rotation. That's, I wouldn't say shorthanded, but clearly they want to give minutes to Poole. I think they don't want to give as many minutes to Nico Mannion. Unfortunately, they don't want to give as many minutes to Brad Wanamaker, but Poole's really the one I feel confident in. And Wiggins, too, I think kind of is more going to be affected by the backcourt absences than he is some of the front court guys. But I think to me, I think Jordan Poole right now looks overowned. I just think there's going to be enough guys here, both Pascal and Wiseman, even if they're not going to play a crazy amount of minutes, those guys do get a good amount of shots up. And I think with Poole, the issue that I have is he's not assisting at a crazy high rate. He's not really rebounding either. And we know that Draymond Green can certainly do more in both those categories. Wiggins, too, could do a little bit more and I think take some off the table. So if you have then Pascal and Wiseman getting their shots up, if Poole goes from 20 shot attempts to 15 shot attempts, I think you're asking him to maintain kind of unsustainable hit rate for things if you want him to have an outlier day. So I don't think Poole kills you today. I just am a little more inclined to get away or just get less in the field here because he's going to be one of the chalk plays on DraftKings and I think also pretty highly owned on FanDuel. And I think you can find comparably projected players where you're maybe losing a point or two, but you're getting a fraction of the ownership. And I think this is one spot today that I may be willing to get away from the field a bit more on.
Kyrie Irving will be out for at least the next 3 games. So Spags, is James Harden a lock play for Brooklyn if he plays? And who else benefits if Harden is in and if Harden is out?
So James Harden to me right now, assuming that he's going to be playing, looks like the best play on the slate by a pretty wide margin. He's going against the Portland team, who we know for the most part is not good defensively. One of the worst defensive teams in the league, really, right? Just there with Sacramento, I think, in terms of the bottom of the barrel. But with James Harden, the rates for him without Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant since February have been unbelievably amazing. Just 35% usage, a 55% assist rate for him. Even if you mark those numbers down a bit, he's still going to project as a 5 to 6x value based upon his salaries on DraftKings and FanDuel. So I don't think you can get away without playing Harden today, barring the unexpected, barring Portland, completely running away with the game, which has happened a couple times that it has been just the Harden cast of Brooklyn because they just don't have enough weapons sometimes. But I think Harden gets a lot done here. And the other guys who benefit, if Harden's out, everybody on the Nets is in play, I think, because there's just so much left behind with no Kyrie, no Kevin Durant, and no Harden. If Harden's in, Bruce Brown's going to be a chalky play. I think that's fine. Nick Claxton, seems like a decent value. And Tyler Johnson can get enough minutes to be usable, but I don't know if the ceiling's that high there, Eric. So I feel like for me, it's probably Harden and maybe Brown or bust.
I'm right there with you. Yeah. For me, if Harden's in, he is your top performing player on the slate. Now we got to talk about some hypotheticals because we don't know when this news is going to come out. You obviously have on DraftKings, you have Damian Lillard, who's a viable pivot for $1,000 less. Make sure you have some roster spots. This is a 6-game slate. You have another game in Philly and Golden State, which has some viable pieces that we have already talked about. So make sure that you have a couple of ideas of what those swaps are going to look like, because if this news comes out before lock, screw it. Like, we're going to know exactly kind of where to go. And every single Brooklyn net becomes in play. Somebody who I haven't really been high on because I don't really see the path for crazy minutes for him in any situation is Nicholas Claxton, who's garnering gigantic ownership. And he's sitting with one of the highest negative leverage scores on the boom bust tool. And I just really, I find myself lower on him every single slate, even though he keeps smashing. I'm going to keep riding that train and being underweight to him there. But otherwise, like I think every single Brooklyn net becomes viable in some capacity should Harden sit. And if Harden plays, I think it's just very noticeably Bruce Brown in him.
Derrick Rose finally cleared health protocols for the Knicks and is expected back tonight versus Washington. Eric, does anyone look good from New York with this usage-heavy return to the rotation?
This is kind of a tortoise and the hare situation. So you're talking about the team with the fastest pace in the NBA and the Washington Wizards facing the team with the slowest pace in the NBA and the New York Knicks. I was kind of expecting some of this news to break towards, Alec Burks to be breaking towards some of these other guys. But now with Rose in there, this kind of puts a wrench into everything that I was planning last night when I was writing the Slate Starter article, when I was doing the podcast with Impact, just kind of looking at Julius Randle. He's going to be very noticeably the guy that you want to be taking some shots on. And not only that, but playing just the most ridiculous, massive minutes. There's nobody that's really going to cut into that time. Yeah, Mitchell Robinson's going to come in, but it's going to be him and Noel. Noel, I was excited to get to, expecting that Mitchell Robinson would probably sit, having just come back from injury, but it looks like he's going to be giving it a go. So it just seems like it's a little diluted. It's a little bit messy. We'll see what Quickly ends up doing here as well, but right now it's kind of Randle, and he's really the only guy that I'm going to be getting to on this team against a team that I would love to target against.
I think Randle, he's got the ceiling. I think that's really the main thing there. But projection-wise, I'm not sure how much I'll get because of having Rose back in the mix. That's another guy who's in, and we talk about these a lot. Talk about this a lot in these shows. But just having these guys priced for one situation, which is that Rose is out, Quickly's been in and out, Peyton's been out. Now you're going to have all these guys basically back in, and Derrick Rose really being a big one. A guy who's been around 28% usage on the year, a little bit lower for the most part in court time with Randle. I think it pulls enough away that you're basically just taking kind of a moonshot if you're going to Julius Randle, but everybody else here, Mitchell Robinson being back in too, that squeezes a rebound opportunity for Randle just enough that I think you're paying a premium here, and you can pay that premium just on the chance of getting a ceiling. But I think if you're looking for a player who might pop up more in lineups or deservedly pop up more in lineups, I think it's actually Derrick Rose. And I think there's some risk there. We have seen guys come back from being on the health protocol / COVID list and play a big run. And right now, Awesemo has Derrick Rose in for 26 minutes, which I think is a reasonable projection, maybe a little high, maybe a little low. And I think that's one guy who you can take the stab at in the hopes that he gets more run and just comes back and asserts himself as some guys who you wouldn't even expect, guys who talk about having, really very visible symptoms with COVID, have come back and had good games, including Jimmy Butler, who lost weight during it. So maybe Rose comes back and all of a sudden looks like Chicago Bulls MVP Derrick Rose. You don't know. I just think that's a flyer I'm willing to take a little bit more today.
Yeah, I want to just piggyback 1 second. So Derrick Rose, I think that there is a large minutes. This is not a typical Thibodeau situation where we can kind of guarantee Rose to come back and throw it in. He was saying that this was 10 times worse than the flu for him. It sounds like his conditioning's a little bit off right now, Derrick Rose. So I think that there is a large minutes variability that exists. He could play 18, 20. He could play up to 30 because of the obvious Tibbs bump that he gets. I guess I was referring to Elf Payton, not Emmanuel Quickly. Emmanuel Quickly is going to probably be playing. He's kind of out of play where he's priced at. But if Elf Payton goes, I think that'll just make it so much easier to not have any Derrick Rose exposure. But otherwise, I think he's definitely a guy, not with any kind of certainty, but just because of how large that minutes range can be for him, I definitely want to take some shots there too.
Lonzo Ball is questionable after he missed the last game. I did a video about his necklace. You can find it on the Side Action YouTube channel, resulting in Nickeil Alexander-Walker start. Spags, how would Ball missing again affect things today against the Lakers?
So I think for one, it's not great for Zion to have Nickeil Alexander-Walker in there, a guy who's going to take some shots off the table, can also assist fairly well. And we saw Kira Lewis again getting more run into something I've talked about a good amount, where if you have JJ Redick out and you have no backup point guard getting run, you're going to see more points Zion. If you have JJ Redick out and you have another point guard in there like Kira Lewis playing big minutes, you just see less productive minutes for Zion. And I think it's just not great for Zion. I think it's going to be probably not great for Brandon Ingram too, but he's sort of, I think, on his own island, whereas Zion, really the ceiling days he has come when he's rebounding at a higher rate, assisting at a higher rate, and scoring like he does. So I think if Ball is out and we get Alexander Walker in, I just don't think it's a great thing. I think Alexander Walker becomes one of the better value or value-ish plays. He's a little bit more expensive than, the 3K guys you're normally looking at. And I think he's been really productive on the year. So really the bump for Nickeil Alexander Walker is the thing I'm looking at, or would be looking at if we do get Ball out. And then if Walker is in, really, I think just downgrading the rest of the Pelicans enough, because Alexander Walker in his second year, he's really starting to assert himself more. And I think that's the main thing to me, is he's a guy who thinks he's as good as these guys. And that can sometimes have bad effects when you're paying the premium price for some of the other Pelicans.
Sorry, it affects his usage rate. So that's the one thing. It definitely affects his usage rate for both of them. But Brandon Ingram is a 1.17 DraftKings points per minute player with or without Ball on the court. If you go over to, any of the sites that you used to be able to check some of the on and off court tool stuff, you're looking at Zion Williamson getting a 0.12 bump on DraftKings with Lonzo Ball off the floor as opposed to on it alongside him. So Zion, Lonzo Ball is not going to carry the usage rate that a Nickeil Alexander-Walker is. And obviously I would have interest going to NAW there, but I have absolutely no problem going over top of the field on Zion because of all the other ancillary stats that he picks up. All the other, the rebounding rate goes up, the assist rate goes up. I would be having way, way more interest in Zion Williamson and going over top the field should Lonzo Ball get out, because it does help his other stats, whereas opposed to NAW is just basically out there scoring the basketball.
All right, we're going to head over to our one-on-one segment. But before we do, producer Jordan got the people talking in the chat about almond milk and oat milk, and it's a pretty heated debate. Do you guys have any opinions on that?
Almond milk, 4 days. Yes.
I don't really I don't mind either. I find them great either, but I found interesting. I learned recently how they're made because we get that bitchin sauce thing, which I think is pretty popular.
Yes. So good.
It's like an almond, it's basically like a dip, basically. It kind of tastes like hummus, but it's made out of almonds. And I guess it's the same process that they make the almond milk with. And then you grind it up basically and strain out the nuts. It's interesting. I mean, I didn't know you could make your own almond and oat milk. And that was really the amazing part to me, that I too could be doing this stupid thing in my own house, probably making a much worse version, really.
Eric, what about you?
I don't have anything to say. I'm not familiar with the bitchin' sauce. I've heard of it, but I haven't taken a look into it. So I'm probably gonna have to order some of that so that I can join the Blue Hat Club.
Can you get it at other places besides Whole Foods, or is it like exclusive to them?
I know it delivers from Imperfect Foods too, because that's where we've gotten it sometimes, but I don't know. It's definitely getting more popular. I feel like I've seen a lot of the very aesthetically minded and looks minded Instagram girls that I know posting about it more. So I feel like that's really the first step before it hits the mainstream of America.
All three of us live in LA. Can you tell? Can you tell?
All right, heading over to our one-on-one in these battles between stars. Which player would you rather have in NBA DFS or prop bets tonight? We're going to start off with Nikola Vucevic's price is trending downwards with numerous Magic players getting back to full health. Nikola Jokic still remains pricey, but better results despite a similar situation with his team in Denver. So which Nikola do you want more in this one-on-one, Vuce or Jokic? Eric, we'll start with you.
I think it's clearly Nikola Jokic for me. I know that he's going to be a little bit more expensive. We have so much value that already exists on the slate. Vuce just got kind of an influx of some of these other Orlando pieces that are coming back and being healthy. Now, the one little wrench to throw in there is Aaron Gordon demanding for a trade. Right now, he's garnering quite a bit of ownership here. I'm not sure what they're going to do with his minutes. We're getting to this point, that weird, funky week in NBA DFS where we're not really sure how many minutes certain guys are going to get played for, whether or not they're going to show them off, whether or not they're going to protect them from injury. I try not to factor it in a crazy amount, but I do factor it in more than I ever do during any other week of the year, because there's just so much variability that can exist for his minutes and his usage for Aaron Gordon, that is. So Vuce could end up getting some extensive run. He could also there's just so many question marks that surround him. The sure thing is Nikola Jokic. So that I'm just going to go that direction.
Yeah, I agree. I think Nikola Jokic has the higher points projection overall. On the salary, I think is the main thing where I could see the salary working a little better with Vucevic and getting there just a little bit more because he's cheaper and that the savings could matter. I think Jokic, you're really a player who the ceiling is there every single game. Having Millsap being back in, having JaMychal Green back in, that really hasn't impacted Jokic as much as you might think, where normally there's a trickle down of just losing a few stats here and there can mean the ceiling isn't quite as high, but Jokic has had 70 fantasy point games recently. So I really feel like you can't ever debate Nikola Jokic, but if you did, as Eric mentioned, if you got some news here that they're holding Aaron Gordon out because maybe there's a team that wants him, you don't want to risk injury after Gordon is coming off of injury, and he just also had one of his best games of the year. There are some ways that Vuce could get more appealing before lock, but right now I think the main reason that you would go to Vuce is just the price savings, and that doesn't make him a better play. So I think you'd have to take Jokic in the one-on-one.
Montrezl Harrell seems to gain the most with Anthony Davis and LeBron out. He'll face Zion Williamson and the Pelicans tonight. Spags, which rim running big man appeals more relative to their DFS price points? Montrez or Zion? Sorry.
I think for me, I got thrown off by relative, but the Zion part, I think we talked about enough earlier, and I feel like it's got to be Harrell here just because he's cheaper. He probably has a similar I think ceiling to Zion, well, maybe not a similar ceiling, but a similar median projection, and it's going to be on the higher end. And I think really compared to Zion's floor, like that's where we're going Harrell is at. I think if you're going to get Harrell for 40 and you think Zion's going to have a mediocre day and it's going to be around 40, I think you're definitely going to take the discount for Harrell. But the rates for Harrell just jump off really in a major way without LeBron and Anthony Davis too, but really without LeBron is a big part for Harrell, where for smaller sample sizes, you could see him get above a 33% usage rate overall in the year. He's about a 28% usage rate guy who rebounds a little better, is projected to play more minutes. Awesemo has been for 30 minutes today. So you added more minutes, more usage, all those things I think make Harrell a better play. Whereas if we do have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, starting again, it does make Zion a worse play. There are some moving parts with the Pelicans too that I think make Zion have some degree of risk. The ceiling's always going to be there for him, but I just think that Harrell being productive today is likely to be in a closer range of outcomes to Zion than many people out there will probably think.
By the way, I know the word relative.
I was wondering if
Are
I
you
typed it
sure?
wrong, and I was like, oh shit, did I phrase this incorrectly? That's always where my head goes.
No, you didn't. I just can't read.
Oh. Well, relative to what you said, I'm pretty sure that I want to go the direction of Zion Williamson. Have we gotten this Marc Gasol news? Because there was a possibility of him being back there. I think him even being back for 4 to 6 minutes, that's really kind of the wrench that can be thrown into this situation. I have a lot of Harrell interest. I will probably have Harrell interest at the decreased price tag either way, but keep your eyes peeled for what happens with Marc Gasol. It sounded like he was probably going to come back today. That's a sneaky little piece of news that might go under the radar. So if we find out some more information there, I would think he would be a little bit overowned if that news were to come out after lock, because it's just not something that anybody's going to be factoring in that heavily. But Zion, regardless of situation, is going to be a fantasy monster today.
Ben Simmons has been largely unimpressive in his recent run without Joel Embiid. Draymond Green has also had some downturns recently without his better half and Steph Curry. Eric, who looks better in this one-on-one, Simmons or Draymond?
I'm always going to side with Ben Simmons over Draymond Green simply because I think that there's just so much upside that exists with Embiid off the floor. And we saw it in that one Utah game, which I'm kind of still clinging to in so many different ways. If Simmons decides to assert himself in any spot, there's nobody on a floor who can guard him that can stop him from getting to the rim. The one issue that we have been talking a lot about with Draymond Green is all of those easy assists he would get for dribble handoffs, for all of those little situations for the pick and roll with him up top with Steph Curry. All of those have faded away. Jordan Poole has been effective, but he is not Steph Curry. And obviously, if you think that he is, fire up Draymond Green. I just don't really like seeing his fantasy profile. I'm looking for triple-double upside. His usage is unaffected. He's put up 7 and 2 points, I believe, his last 2 games in real points. So like Draymond Green isn't going to be as enticing as a guy like Ben Simmons. Obviously, you can play him at small forward as well. Over on DraftKings, you can play him at a forward spot. So that gives me a little bit more leg up on going the Simmons direction.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as Eric here. I think really the main thing with Draymond is that you're sort of banking on an outcome that to me seems unlikely. And I think that we sort of saw it with that Memphis game. The second Memphis game that Golden State played there was not good for Draymond. The first one, though, was good, even though he was 0 for the floor, didn't hit a shot in that one, which is mostly assisting and rebounding at a high level. And if he does that, he's going to have the outlier day, but Ben Simmons can still score, can also rebound at a high rate, can also assist at a high rate. And I think there really is a lot more reason to go to Simmons than Draymond. I think people chase that Draymond ceiling, but really with Simmons, you have a reasonable floor. And I think a ceiling that we really haven't seen. And Eric mentioned that game against Utah where Simmons obviously went nuts, had one of the best games of his career. And we saw him get close to that in Milwaukee where he had a good game, but mostly was kind of aided by overtime. But yes, the last game that they played against the Knicks for Simmons, he had more usage in that game, was looking like he was trying to get a shot more in a pace down spot. So I think if he's going into this aggressively today against Golden State, I think the ceiling is really high for Simmons here in a way that's going to be much more predictable than Draymond's, where if Draymond has a 50-point day, you're not surprised today. I think if he has a 20-point day, you're probably not surprised either. I don't think there's any way in the world that Simmons has a 20-point day today. So I think that's really a big difference between the two.
Shout out to Jordan again, who told everyone to like and subscribe. And we would love for you to do that. And let us know what we should all match with the next time we're on the show together. If you like our blue hats.
Which is tomorrow. So pressure's on. Way to go. Now we have to put in work. Come on. What are you doing?
Just want to get the chat going, Also, if you're not able to watch your favorite Awesemo shows on YouTube, almost all of our Awesemo YouTube shows are available through the Awesemo Podcast Network. We've got a podcast for every sport, and we're available on every major platform. So head on over to awesemo.com/podcast To check out the latest, just leave a 5-star review on one of our podcasts with your Twitter handle or email address, and you'll be eligible to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. One winner will be rewarded every Friday, and reviews will be eligible to win for up to 1 year. Best of luck. Let's head on over to our No House Advantage prop or not. Here are some of No House Advantage's props for the day. For key players, do you like the over or under on them, guys? We're going to start with Kyle Kuzma, who is sitting at over under 25.5 points and rebounds. Spags, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, I think this is one of those spots of No House Advantage that we talk about a lot on there, where it's the equivalent of a DFS player being priced at $3K on a day that he ends up being a starter and one of the high usage guys out. Like, I don't know what the situation would be here. That's comparable if every Pelicans player were out and then you had Kira Lewis in there and he's playing 40 minutes in a game. Like, that's kind of the situation. Is sometimes a No House Advantage where they have these prop lines set on the chance that LeBron might have made it back in, that Anthony Davis might have made it back in. And I think Kuzma, as a result, is going to look like one of the better plays on No House Advantage today, because I just find it hard to believe that he doesn't get there. He rebounds at a higher rate with no LeBron and no Anthony Davis, about a 15% rebound rate for him, which is a really nice number for a guy in Kuzma, who I think people still tend to file away as a pure points dependent guy. Rebounding for him is going to be a big asset, but the points are going to be there too. They just need to get shots up against really anybody is on the Lakers going to get a chance to take the shots, but Kuzma, they've shown a concerted effort to get more looks too. So I think in this spot for No House Advantage, it's a line that doesn't reflect the current situation. And also Kuzma's just not in a bad spot at all. So I think really you combine those two factors, and I think this one would be an easy over for me.
I'm right there with you. I like going that direction of it. Kyle Kuzma, this is just a completely different situation. You're getting mid-30s to high 30s minutes in this spot as long as this game stays close. I know that guys like Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart on the other side are going to go out, not to go down narrative street too much again, but this is kind of a matchup that I do kind of associate these two teams together because of that Anthony Davis trade. I think it should be a competitive game, probably more so than they've had in their last couple. The Lakers have kept it tight, I guess, the first two times without LeBron here. But Kyle Kuzma, completely different outlook, completely different player. That 27.5 is too low.
All right, Eric, we'll go right back to you for Julius Randle, over under 40.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. Where are you going with this?
So this is just kind of one of those muddy situations where it's going to be close to 50-50. I know Alex is shining on the under, sitting there for the combination of the three. I mean, I'm having a tough time. I feel like his fantasy outlook in a game where it is up tempo, where it is going to be as pace up of a spot as you can possibly get, considering the Wizards lead the NBA in pace. But I'm going to side on the under a little bit. The Derrick Rose unknown factor just makes it a difficult one to really want to plant your flag into one way or the other. But if you have to go one direction, I'm going to take the under because that is an influx of usage that's going away from him. Points are the thing that you accumulate the most in that grouping. So points matter the most. And I think that there is a downside that exists. Yeah, maybe the rebounding assists kind of maintain where they are, but his points alone are something that I want to shade on the under of. So putting them and grouping them together doesn't change that for me.
Yeah, I think this to me is the inverse of what we were just talking about with Kuzma, where you are now getting a Knicks team that has had a few guys out for the last few weeks, and it's had guys in and out as well, for the last few weeks. And I think in this spot for the Knicks, I really feel like they just have too many bodies in there. Assuming that Rose does make it in, as reports seem to be indicating. If he's out, then I think you're a little more comfortable taking the over. But I think if you're taking the over with this bet, you're really looking, assuming that Rose is in, you're looking for an outlier day for Randle. And I just don't think that's going to be the move on No House Advantage, where those bets can hit. Like Julius Randle's an amazing player who's had one of his best years, has finally kind of blossomed into the player a lot of people thought he could be earlier in the league. But I think in this situation for Randle, just having Rose back in there, having Mitchell Robinson also when they're taking rebounds away, you're now getting pulled on two different parts of that profit that you need to have. And maybe Randle gets there just through pure brute force of points or rebounding at a higher rate or just getting lucky with assists, whatever the case may be. But I think you're playing a narrower margin that you would normally be playing. And then you probably should be playing for this slate because you're just, again, paying a price for something that's happened in the last few games. So going to Randle today for the over seems like a bad move. I would take the under here. And if he beats you, that's fine because at least you got beaten by a great player. But either way, I think this is still like a 1 or 2 pointer, not a 10 or 9 pointer on No House Advantage.
James Harden, over under 40.5 points and assists. Spags, what do you like?
I think this one has to be the over for all the reasons we just talked about for Harden. And of course, don't play the bet if Harden ends up out, because you could bet an under on a guy who's out. It doesn't matter. You just end up pushing on that bet and losing points for yourself. So keep that in mind, because I think people sometimes get confused with playing on a new site like No House Advantage that does combine the prop betting with the DFS peer-to-peer components that we normally talk about. But besides that, though, I feel like in the spot for Harden, he's going to have the run of the castle. You have no Kyrie, no Kevin Durant. We talked about it earlier, but Harden's had about a 35% usage rate, a 55% assist rate. Those are outlandish numbers that should make it very possible for him to get there. If he sucks today, same thing as I was talking about with Randle, but the opposite, if he sucks today, then you got a bad James Harden day, and that's terrible. I had one of those on FanDuel on Friday that kept me from having any sort of nice winnings on that day. And if James Harden's the one that kills you on a given slate, so be it. But you have to kind of lean into the parts of him that we know and that have been there for really the last few years. And that's just that he dominates games, but he's the only guy who can do anything on a court. It's going to be the case today for Brooklyn in a really nice spot against Portland. So I think you kind of have to be there heavy on the over.
Got to let it be known, if you're playing on No House Advantage, do not take the under on James Harden in that spot, because you get a 0. So you'll get a 0 if he's inactive.
You mean the thing I just said?
Yeah. So don't do that. Just letting it be known. I love playing over there, and I've had some nice success in a lot of their golf product, had some success in the NFL with the interceptions props we were taking the over of. But if you have a player that ends up inactive before lock, if they get scratched and they play a minute, you're fine. If he plays a minute and it ends up being the under, if his neck cramps up, yeah, you're going to win the under. But if he doesn't play, if he ends up getting ruled out, you'll get a 0. So do not take the under. Play somebody else. You'll have Damian Lillard. You'll have a number of different options that you can go to at least remove the possibility of getting a 0 from your lineup there. But in regards to it, yes, I definitely like the over in that situation. If he were to go, there's for whatever reason, Orlando has James Harden figured out. His 2 worst games against the same team as a Brooklyn net. So that's kind of just an interesting spot. But against Portland, this is just an absolute smash for him if he were to go. I can't imagine that I would have a single lineup without him in it if he were to be assuming on NHA as well. I definitely want to be taking the over of that 40.5 just about everywhere too.
Good stuff. And as always, fans, don't forget to play on No House Advantage, our sponsor, who is taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports. They're offering player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes. This exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform levels the playing field and makes it easier for you to win real cash compared with your traditional DFS sites. The best part is you can join for free today. Just download the No House Advantage app and use promo code Awesemo to receive a deposit bonus of up to $20 for new signups. Be your friends, not the house. Win big with player props today. That brings us to DFS Hedge. Guys, how can you hedge daily fantasy lineups with a bet like taking the over on a prop for a player you're fading tonight, Eric?
Yeah, I'm very curious. Greg was talking the other day when I was tuning into you guys. I wasn't on the show, talking about how he doesn't like to hedge his idea of what the lineup, what his lineups are. He would want to be on the other side of the prop. I think it's more than okay. If you expect somebody to put up fantasy points in one direction and not in another, to go that direction. On NHA, take the under on Julius Randle points or the grouping of that. And then you can still play him in DFS because there are a number of ways that he can get there. He's also not somebody that at power forward, where there aren't that many options to be spending up for, on a site like FanDuel where you have to play 2. I have no problem taking an under on a guy that I'm still going to be invested in for DFS purposes. I'm not sure what you thought about that, Spags. I think you guys were on the show together for that, but I thought that was an interesting talking point where obviously I don't inherently want to be on the complete opposite side of my take when it comes to props, but there are other ways to bet them in the markets to be able to capitalize on a take you might have that is against one part of his portfolio and then still can be a good outlook for him fantasy wise.
I think what Greg was saying, actually, you were saying he made some good points there. And I think really the main thing, though, that part of the reason we put the segment in was that our founders and Tom, our CEO, was like, hey, this would be a good segment there because that's one way that a lot of sharp players do things. And I think I got what Greg was going for there, where, you don't want to, if you have a good take and you make the right call here, you play a Harden 100%, then, you're going to benefit from that in DFS and you're going to lose if he doesn't do well, but you're then pinned to that one outcome. And he didn't find the idea to be appealing of trying to pair that with maybe what you would perceive as bad money, which is going against Harden. And I would agree with that. Like, I don't think you need to take the under on Harden for a prop bet. Maybe a no house advantage is a little bit different because you're sort of then creating leverage on no house advantage against your own lineups on DFS sites, and maybe also psychology from people who are playing on DraftKings, FanDuel, SuperDraft, and then coming over to no house advantage. So I think that's sort of the leverage concept, really. But I think the hedge part to me, and I think this is the part that Greg sort of glossed over or wasn't maybe seeing quite the same way, was that the hedge really part of is that if you're playing Harden 100% and then you place a bet on Portland to win, let's say you even teased it up or whatever, but it's a 3-point spread right now. Like, if you just took the 3-pointer there and you put $1,000 on Portland to cover that, like, theoretically, Harden's not going to, if Harden doesn't get there, they're not going to cover. So you can go that way. And that to me is how I view it, where if I end up with 100% Harden, like I'm anticipating I probably will right now, I can't legally bet in California, but if I could, I probably would be like, okay, cool. It might be smart for me to then just put $100 bet on Portland, because then if Harden has a bad day, I'm sort of mitigating that damage. The downside is if you were right about that first take, you're cutting into your losses a little bit. But if the hedge number that you're doing for your bets, if placing a $100 bet covers 50% of your entry fees on DraftKings or FanDuel or whatever the case may be, I think that's sort of the way to look at it. So to me, just based on lineup construction, how things are looking, I think taking Portland on the betting markets would be the move. And then you're going to have 100% Harden probably, or some crazy amount on FanDuel and DraftKings. And at least you'll feel better if that goes south, because you'll know you have that Portland bet to look back on.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And probably not as long-winded either, I think, if you tried, but that's the main thing.
And as
I would have
always,
listened more intently if it was Kayla, though.
Oh, well, thank you, Eric.
I know that.
Don't forget to check out the new win percentage and ROI percentage tools on oddshopper.awesemo.com, Eric's favorite, to see some of the highest probability bets according to Alex Awesemo Baker every single night. Have you talked about OddShopper yet today?
I have not, but I absolutely love the place. Again, you're getting the number one player in the world's projections demonstrated into prop form, and you are able to go take them out onto the marketplace and print money. It is not, this is a no-brainer. This is a spot where the win percentage, the ROI percentage, I guess for some people too, it might look weird for an ROI situation where it's like, oh, minus 210, I don't want to put up 210 to win 100, but man, like, yeah, even if that win percentage is gigantic, you're just looking at a situation where you're always going to get it in good. Like, it is very hard to be going with Alex's projections and get in bets poorly. And that's really what the name of the game is, getting a good number and making sure that you have the best of it every single time out. And that's what you get for free. Well
said. Let's go to our favorite segment, Good Dog, Bad Dog.
How good are you?
There it is. In real life, there is no such thing as a bad dog. In betting and DFS, there are a lot of underdogs who may have no chance in their game. So guys, who's a good dog to target tonight and who's a bad one? Spags, we'll start with your good dog.
I think my good dog is going to be the Lakers. And I think anytime you see the Lakers with a 6-point spread going against them on the road against a Pelicans team who really does have the ability to put teams away early and make it uncomfortable, I think that's going to give some cause for concern, especially the Lakers being such a public team, because they are the Lakers. They have LeBron, they have AD. All those things normally mean that their spreads are going to be more favorable towards them. So maybe this would be an 8-point spread if they were, I don't know, team X or team Y, whatever the case may be. But I still like the Lakers here. I think Harrell's going to have a nice day rim running, and maybe Steven Adams clogs the paint enough. Maybe Jackson Hayes or Willie Hernangomez come in and add some meaningful defense. I don't really know. I don't see it happening. I think Harrell has an outlier day. I think that the Taylor Horton Tuckers of the world, the Kyle Kuzmas of the world do their job. I think Schroeder too has some potential to show a little bit more of what he has, especially we do see Lonzo Ball out, who Lonzo Ball, I know individual defense doesn't matter that much for DFS, but it's a much better matchup going from Ball to Nickeil Alexander-Walker potentially. So I think that bodes well for them. Really, the Lakers overall, this is their show and prove time. They might have a month now of no AD, no LeBron, at least 2 weeks of no AD. And then LeBron's ankle sprain is going to keep him out probably 4 weeks, it seems. So they have to show they can do something here. And this is the first game out. So I feel like this is really one where I want to see them go big. And I think that maybe guided me more here to think these guys are a good dog.
I'm going to go the Brooklyn Nets right now. We're seeing that line start to move as if James Harden isn't going to play, and I still think that he's going to. he just can kind of assert himself. We saw the Indiana game where he just went in and it was the same situation that I was on that day when we were on the show together, where you saw that line just move completely against the Nets because Kyrie was out and everybody was going against James Harden. James Harden can carry a basketball team. He wasn't playing to the full capacity at the front end of the season when he was with the Rockets. He was trying to force his way out there, probably wearing 4 or 5 t-shirts because he wanted to look maybe more out of shape than what he actually was, because he was shredded immediately when he stepped foot on the court in Brooklyn. I really like going to James Harden. I like piggyback on top of him from a fantasy profile, from a sports betting profile. I want to be on the right side of that. 3.5 is too many should James Harden go. So stay alert on that news. You do have that minute and a half window from when that news comes out before you can bet it, or that you will still have to bet it to react to that news. If James Harden's out, obviously go on the other side of this.
All right, Eric, then who is your bad dog this evening?
Yeah, so it's the Brooklyn Nets. I thought that was kind of a fun gimmick. So if James Harden ends up being out, I'm pretty sure that you want to be absolutely all over 3.5 from Portland, because there's just absolutely no way that Brooklyn is going to keep that game close without James Harden on the court. No Kyrie, no KD, it's just a completely different basketball team. You will see that line move so hard that it's ridiculous. It'll be a 7.5 point game before you can blink if James Harden gets ruled out. So please just be by your phone, be ready to react. That's the positive thing that Greg Ehrenberg has put into my life, is making sure that I am on top of reacting as soon as that news comes out.
I think my bad dog is going to be the Orlando Magic today. And I don't really know. I mean, there obviously are only 6 games. There's not a lot of great choices out there. And some of these spreads are so close that I feel like it's hard to sort of pinpoint a bad dog. So those are my caveats here before going there. But I just feel like for Orlando, there's one thing they don't do well is set each other up. And that's going to be the case, I think, because they haven't had a true point guard for a lot of the year. But Denver, the way they get beat, they give up about 12% more assisted shots from 2 than league average, about 5% more assisted threes. And that's really the recipe to kind of putting up big days against Denver. If they can't get that going today, I think they're going to have a tough time. And they just have a lot of guys who kind of can create their own shots. Guys like Vooch, guys like Aaron Gordon, guys like Evan Fournier. Yeah, these guys assist somewhat, but they're not dominant creators. They're not good shot creators. Michael Carter-Williams isn't meaningfully in the mix enough to really create for these guys. So I have some concerns that the possessions just stall out here. And it's a pretty big spread going against Orlando at home. So I think there are a lot of bad things blowing their way. And on a short slate, I'm willing to call them the bad dog.
You mean Terrence Ross and Evan Fournier playing point guard is a bad thing for assists? That is shocking to me. I'm shocked.
I think, they could try a little harder, Eric. That's the main thing that I always look for in my DFS players, where I just want to coach them up and be like, hey, could you try passing a little more? And I think that would immediately get good results. But that's the issue with not having access to these guys all the time, besides yelling angrily at them on Twitter, I guess.
Yeah, I have a hustle score and a sharing the ball score baked into my model. So I'm always ready for that. You can throw anything at me. I'm ready to go. That's a joke.
Spags, you weren't on the show yesterday. Wait, what?
That was a bad joke. Keep going, please. Take the attention away from
me. You were all about the dad jokes before the show.
Please don't even acknowledge it.
Just please don't look at me right now.
Eric was on before we started. He was telling dad joke after dad joke.
Oh, well, relative to you, that's what I do.
Yes.
That was a really long callback. I see that one. This is not great for me. It's right. Yeah, this is why it's so easy to make fun of me, and I'm happy to take it. Cheers, y'all. Coffee time.
Cheers. Spags, you weren't on the show yesterday when we had this discussion, but where do you stand on players not playing and still being in the race for either Rookie of the Year or MVP, such as LaMelo and now LeBron? Do you feel like they need to play to win, or what's your take?
So this is going to be, I think, a weird analogy at first, but then you're going to immediately get where I'm going. If anybody out there watches Chopped, and I feel like this is where I would view it, where you leave one of the ingredients out, where if you don't know Chopped, hey, shame on you and whatever relationship you're in and how you choose to spend your time, because here we like to watch HGTV and Chopped, and that's one of our things that we did start The Wire. So it's sometimes some classy things in there. But I would say on Chopped, when you leave out one of the ingredients, the rest of the 3 ingredients have to be really good. Like you basically have to put them together and make an amazing meal to then balance out the fact that you just kind of ignored the rules for the competition. And I think that's sort of what it is, where LaMelo Ball was so good, but if Anthony Edwards keeps having 30% usage, keeps scoring 40 real life points in games, like, yeah, you probably have to give it to Anthony Edwards just because he was there all year and he showed the ceiling and he showed more. But I think right now LaMelo seems like he'd be the favorite. I don't know that it holds. I think especially if Halliburton keeps playing big minutes, if Bagley gets traded, and then that opens up that run. The same thing for Edwards, just getting more usage. If Quickly somehow starts to play a lot of minutes here, even though think that's probably the least likely outcome out of all of them for the rookies. But I think, right now LaMelo's got a good case, but these guys really have to beat him over the next few months. And I think that's sort of the thing that I expect is that they probably will beat him. But LaMelo made a great 3-ingredient chop meal. It's just, you got to get that 4th ingredient in.
I like that analogy. I can always relate to
That's
food.
a great, honestly, that's the best analogy I've heard for this period. And that terrifies me that it came from you in a chopped format, man.
Look, genius comes from strange spots, and sometimes that's me wondering, how can they possibly make a dish out of chocolate cake and bacon bits and, I don't know, a horse's semen and
garlic?
Nope. They're like, cool, make a delicious dessert, guys. And then somehow they do. It's impressive.
Kayla has never heard the word semen before. We just found out. She's never once heard that. She just went, her face, if you go back and you freeze frame it, I'm totally going to do it after. She's...
In fairness, she might not have ever heard it in a work environment on an NBA DFS show, which I would say would be completely fair.
She doesn't know Chris Spags very well. I do. I know what you're capable of.
My gosh.
Man.
Tune into the Late Slate Show if you want to hear more of these off-color jokes that occasionally get weird.
Throwing it over to EMAC, letting him just sit in it. Like, just let him sit in it.
We are so far off the tracks. I don't even know how to get back on.
That's the
there's a lot of news that just came out.
We
could talk about some of the Miami was like one of the most unappealing teams in DFS period. Obviously, you still have Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, but we just saw that Okpala got ruled out. We saw that Avery Bradley and Goran Dragic got ruled out. So Kendrick Nunn, probably somebody that I might have some interest in. I know this is a terrible Phoenix Suns matchup in general, but he's kind of the first guy that my brain goes to. But you do have Tyler Hero in the mix there. But Kendrick Nunn, 4,300 over on DraftKings and sitting at 4,600 on FanDuel. We'll kind of see where Alex pegs them at. But a little bit of news that might give us some extra pieces that we can go to in that low 4K range. I do not want to play Trevor Ariza. I don't want to do it. Don't make me do it.
Don't worry. I think these backwards hats are cutting off the circulation in our heads. All right, let's get to our make or break. Which player or game currently looks like a make or break spot to you on tonight's slate, Spags?
Well, I don't know if we haven't mentioned this guy at all show, but I think James Harden might be a crucial one for me tonight. I mean, it sucks because we do this segment at the end of the show, and I feel like by the end of the show, it's like, gee, I wonder who they're going to talk about as their make or break. But I really do feel like that's sort of where it goes, and make or break in a couple different ways. Where I guess actually we have a few minutes, so we maybe we could talk about it here just to fill the time. But like Harden being out, I think is going to completely screw up everything I'm doing in this game. It's a little bit later on the slate too, right? Yeah, it's at a 10 p.m. start East Coast time, 7 p.m. on the West Coast. And I don't know how to handle that if that happens. I know, Eric, you mentioned earlier you could just pivot to Damian Lillard, but then you're not really capturing the value. And I know Awesemo has said before you need at least 3 guys in the game from the late slate to sort of meaningfully swap around or, from whatever slate you're swaptimizing on. And I think that's going to be something I'm going to try to do today, Eric. And I'm just curious your thoughts because I know you do sort of plan the meta game with the optimizers and all of that. And I think maybe requiring 3 minimum from the Portland, Brooklyn, or Philadelphia Golden State game might be my move if we don't know Harden's going to be in for sure. But what are you thinking?
So here's kind of where I was at. And this is not to be team watch the tape because I'm definitely not team watch the tape, but I had no idea what to do with this team in general. So I went back and I watched part of the Indiana game this morning. Tyler Johnson is the guy that we haven't talked about, who just massively jumped out of that game for me. He played 31 and a half minutes in it, 17.2% usage. He put up 24 fantasy points. He's at 3,100 over on DraftKings. That's like the first place that it goes from somebody that I really have like no interest in to I would probably have 100% of him instantly. So it is that large of a disparity between having Harden in, having Harden out. I know that he's already getting some ownership. He did, again, play 31 minutes there. I just don't know if the ceiling exists there in that capacity unless you get James Harden out. The next guy my brain kind of goes to and it's jumped off of the page in that game was Joe Harris, who played 37 minutes, got 19 points, 15.1% usage. At 4,700 on that game is where he was priced. He ended up putting up 28.5 over on DraftKings. Another spot that you can look to. The problem with going to him is that he's just a little bit more expensive than some of these other pieces that sit near the min that are going to be garnering more ownership, but certainly becomes extremely more viable. Those guys get in addition to Bruce Brown, who would for sure be my favorite piece to be going to. Should James Harden sit, or whether or not he's in or not, Bruce Brown is a fantastic play. But yeah, Tyler Johnson gets added to the fold. Joe Harris gets added to the fold. And then Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot, who right now I would have 0% of, also has to be inserted a little bit into the mix. He didn't play that much in that Pacers game, He played like 7 minutes, I believe, but they're going to have to find some scoring output from somewhere. And it's going to be him. You're not going to have Blake Griffin coming in there playing meaningful minutes. You're looking also at possibly having DeAndre Jordan be somebody who maybe gets extended run. Nicholas Claxton, I just don't want to play him either way. I refuse to believe that the minutes are going to be there in a meaningful way. Now that price has come up, even 3,900 at a center position on DraftKings, I don't want to waste it there when I'm going to get Tyler Johnson at the min in probably 100% of my lineups in the absence of Harden. So just letting it be known, that's kind of the priority for me. Bruce Brown 1, Tyler Johnson 2, Joe Harris 3, and then kind of a smattering of the other guys. But I would minimum have those 3 in almost every single lineup on DraftKings.
All right. And it does look like we will have some time. So fans, get your questions in. If you have any questions about daily fantasy betting or whatever you want to chat about below, we'll answer in a few before the deeper dive starts. Let's head on over to fade of the day. Guys, is there one game, player, or team that you anticipate you'll have a lot less interest in than the rest of the public? Eric, we'll start with you.
Did I not fill enough time there? I was doing everything I could.
You were great. Yes.
We're going to get there. We're going to get to the end of the show one way or another. I don't care how many bodily fluids I have to mention from animals.
Oh my gosh.
Fade of the day is this. I'm doing great. See, I can do this. I talk too fast. That's the problem.
Slower. So do I.
Okay, yeah. My fade of the day. Phoenix is going to be a hard team for me to get to on this slate. I know that we're getting Jay Crowder at 3,900, who's garnering some ownership over on FanDuel. Probably no thanks for me there. DeAndre Ayton's at 5,900, which is a crazy number on DraftKings. I'm still finding it difficult to want to roster him because of how well Saric can come in and play in some of these spurts. He did put up 41 last time out, got up to 22.5% usage up against the Lakers. The Lakers really have no answer for any big whatsoever at this point in time. Another reason that I'm just so high on Zion Williamson in general. But I just find it difficult to really want to roster any of these guys. Chris Paul's been a popular target over on FanDuel. Now that price is 7,500. I'm just not really getting there the way that I was when he was 6,900 and 7,100 the last 2 times out. Just that little bit of a price increase. I have to be sensitive to that. So I'm not getting too much Suns.
Yeah, I don't think the Suns look too great either. I feel like Devin Booker, the ceiling has been there a good amount. And certainly the usage rates for him have trended upwards in a way that are appealing. But I agree, like there's nobody here I feel like you must have. DeAndre Ayton's minutes have been getting jerked around good enough that I think, Saric, honestly, at this point is probably as viable a play as Ayton is, which is disappointing for Ayton at his price coming down. But I think my fade of the day, well, I guess on the team level, I think it's Orlando right now with all these guys being back in. I think they're not priced for the appropriate situation. Like, I don't get why Evan Fournier is almost 7K. Aaron Gordon had the outlier day. I get that, but he shouldn't be 7K either. Or if he is 7K, I think as he has been in the past, like you just know that he's not a guy you can really bank on. The ceiling could be there, but the floor is probably not there in a meaningful enough way. And on a player level, I think the one guy I really want to get away from if I can is going to be Jordan Poole right now. And that could be different if Harden ends up out. Maybe it actually won't be different because I think then you'll have the Brooklyn value that Eric mentioned. But I feel like point guard, shooting guard eligibility on DraftKings and similar guard eligibility on FanDuel, I think there are ways you can play other guys who have a higher floor and a higher ceiling than Poole. And I think people will be kind of putting him in just because it's the easy play to make. It's a guy who's probably not going to kill you, but does he have the 40 fantasy point upside when you just add in 2 more usage guys with Wiseman and with Eric Pascal in the mix? I'm not sure. And I think that's sort of one spot I'm willing to get different on today, even if I do have the placeholders in my lineup, which, is going to be probably the case because the Harden news that's going to taunt me for the next fucking 5 hours of my life.
I will amend one thing that I said earlier about that. I'm going through Nicholas Claxton because I don't know why I'm so vehemently against playing him in a lot of these spots. I think it's because those minutes were kind of getting capped around the 23 range. Even with Blake Griffin back, for his first game there against Washington, he got up to 26 minutes, which is kind of surprising for me there. Looking at that, he had a 23.6% usage rate in the game too. Also surprising. Maybe I'm not like as completely against him should Harden be out. But again, if Harden's in, God, I don't want to be playing a chalky piece at a center position over there. On FanDuel, maybe a little bit more viable for me, but I kind of want to bet against those minutes because that's really the first time that we've seen them go up there in a meaningful way.
I'm going to say for Claxton, just to push back a little here, that So Awesemo has him in for 23 minutes today, and I actually have him on the year. He's been a 1.12 fantasy point per minute guy. I have him with how my process works and kind of moves things around. I have him being a 0.93 fantasy point per minute guy, but because he's getting 23 minutes from Awesemo, that still gives him a 21.3 fantasy point projection, and that would theoretically go up without Harden, because the assumption is that somebody has to score if Harden's not there. And Claxton, to me, I think is a guy who can get a bucket in the second unit, and I think that's the way he earns more minutes. So I think you're right, Eric, that if you wanted to fade him, you're probably in a good spot. But if you do fade him and then he gets hot, like, you're going to be screwed, because he's probably going to play a lot of minutes and just be adding material value to a lineup that, like, DeAndre Jordan's not having an outlier day to make up for Kyrie, but maybe Claxton can score enough where he does add meaningfully and just does add run to himself.
I guess it's kind of a process of being somebody who's helping people decide who to play in basketball lineups as well. Like, you want to have a take on everybody. Like, I'm trying to have a take on him in a lot of ways right now. I think I've just been erring on the side of no. But yeah, being at the field is not the worst thing on a play that you're just completely uncertain of, like that, for like I am right now. So I like that. I might just like see what that ownership gets to and kind of make my decisions from there. But right now was leaning lighter, and maybe some of the signs are pointing towards it being an all right play.
Well, look at that. We don't even have time for questions.
I mean, well, boo, I'm sorry for black questions. No. I would have loved to have any questions. I'm just glad we got to the finish line. It was a heroic effort by all of us.
I have a 3v3
well done,
I'd like you to break down on DraftKings quick.
Spags, I didn't even get to ask you about your bracket. We'll save that for tomorrow. Today was weird. Thank you, guys. Eric and Spags, you were great. It was also fun. We're going to do another backwards hat day sometime soon, so stay tuned. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. The Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock are up next. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Kayla Knierim. Good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks,
guys.
How's it going?
Adam, this is for you. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Deeper Dive, presented by No House Advantage. I'm Dave Loughran on Twitter at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. Give me a follow along with my man Adam Scherer at ShipMyMoney DFS. What's up, bro?
Not much. Kind of interesting 6-game slate, I guess. Biggest news on the slate comes in the latest game, in the last game of the night. So a lot to talk about and a lot of, I guess, contingency plans to make.
I noticed DraftKings just gave me $75, and I was like, where'd that come from? You know it's bad when it's because you played so many slots that they rewarded you. $75 from the leaderboard contest, which is hilarious with those contests, right? It's like $1 million to first, but you only win by playing millions of dollars in casino games. You know?
I told you about my friend that hit like a 100K jackpot on one of the random casino sites playing slots, right?
No.
Yeah, he just was like playing slots. He was like playing poker online, but he was like grinding slots in the background just to give him something to do and just hit a 6-figure bonus.
Amazing. I wonder how many dollar spins he was doing.
I have no idea. I don't remember, but yeah, he definitely came out way ahead.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So I didn't come out ahead, but hey, I got $75. That's the best. $75 when it just means nothing at this point. But anyway.
Oh, how rich.
What's up?
I said, how rich.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, we're happy to have you guys with us. We got 6 games to break down here. A little bit of news just rolled in, and you know the drill. Hit that thumbs up for us and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. It's YouTube. They hate the little guy. Show them that we're something to be reckoned with. But in all seriousness, if you like the content, you want to help us out, it's the easiest and freest way to do it. Thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell too, so you always know when new shows are going to drop next. Ready to dive into this?
Yeah.
All right, let's go with Denver and Orlando kicking this one off. I believe we just got news on this, right? Chase and Randle out.
And Terrence Ross out.
Ross is out too. Okay. So both of the questionable players are out. The Denver Nuggets, though, in Orlando are favored in this one by 7.5, 217 total. Let's start it with the Nuggets on the road. They're without Monte Morris and Gary Harris, so it doesn't really mean much. Those guys have been out, and, well, how much are they really influencing this team anyway? Ownership as well on Denver right now is really nothing crazy, but Nikola Jokic is always going to get a little bit of love because he's Nikola Jokic. Although I look at it and I do see since our last update, it does appear that ownership has come up a little bit on Denver.
Yeah, and I think it's a decent spot. I mean, you have like 112 point implied total for the Nuggets. Orlando has struggled a bit defensively lately as well. And with, Morris and Harris being out, they're not integral parts of the offense, like you said, but that is a lot of minutes that are missing. You have seen prices move up a little bit, to account for that, but you are still getting a bunch of minutes for Will Barton. You're getting more minutes for Michael Porter Jr. Both of those guys look okay, but obviously the starting point here is Nikola Jokic, who is always one of the best DFS options on the slate. He's averaging about 36 minutes per game. He averages over 1.6 DraftKings points per minute, leads the team in usage, rebounding, assist percentage. Everything looks great there. And there's a lot of payoff options on this slate, but there is also enough value that I don't think it should be too difficult to get to Jokic in a good number of lineups.
Yeah, where are you at, though? And by the way, what's up to all of you guys in chat? Glad you're here, shooting the shit with us on a Tuesday night. What are your thoughts on some of this ownership? Like right now, 5 players from Denver on DraftKings have double-digit ownership. Nothing crazy, no one up into the 20s, but from 10 to 19.5% ownership at Awesemo.com, by the way, there's a decent amount of intrigue going here. And I think some of this, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, could just have to do with the fact that there are a couple games in a number of teams that just have very, very little intrigue altogether.
Yeah, I think it's that. And if you look at the guys on Denver, they, excluding Jokic, because obviously he looks like a great option, they all just sort of look like plays that project well, but not great at their salaries. And so they're going to be guys that are helpful to round out lineups. Like you look at Paul Millsap, who's projected for the most ownership from the Nuggets on DraftKings. You're never going to feel good about rostering Paul Millsap, but he's only $3,900, and it just opens up so much for you. And then he's a volatile enough player as well that you could certainly get, more playing time than normal. He's averaged 24 minutes per game in his starts this year, but last game he played almost 30 minutes, and that's certainly in his range of outcomes here as well. So if you project him for 24 minutes, he's a good enough point per dollar play. If he gets more than that, you're assuming he's going to have a good game for his salary. You can kind of say the same thing for guys like Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, Will Barton. Like all of these guys, I think the minutes are going to be there. The production on average is going to put them right around like 5 times their salary, give or take. But obviously, that's an average. That's average production. Guys are going to have an above average game a lot of the time. So there is upside in these Denver guys, even outside of Jokic.
All right. So who would you say outside of Jokic would be towards the top for you, if anyone? I get the sense that a lot of these guys are secondary options.
Yeah, they are. Outside of Jokic, I would say Millsap, just on DraftKings because of that value. It's not, again, it's not that I feel very confident in Millsap, but the general rule of thumb when you talk about players that have volatile minutes like Millsap does is to roster them when either they're low owned or when they're cheap. And this is about as cheap as you're ever going to get Paul Millsap this year on DraftKings.
Yeah, and I mean, for good reason, but
yeah, sure.
But it does make some sense. If we talk about Orlando, no Ross, no Randle. I mean, they've dealt with so many injuries all season long, right? Anthony is one who's been out for a while. They were missing Gordon forever. Jonathan Isaac hasn't played. Michael Carter-Williams was out. Markelle Fultz is done for the year. Just like the list goes on and on and on of players on this team that have been down for an extended period of time. So yeah, Randle and Ross aren't the two biggest losses, but they will still affect the rotation. How do you see that happening today against Denver?
Yeah, so there's the biggest thing. The first thing is that you should get backup point guard Aaron Gordon again, which so I guess the biggest question mark with Gordon is, does his formally requesting a trade out of Orlando change the playing time? I'm assuming that it doesn't. Like, he's not on the injury report. I haven't heard he's not playing. If he plays, I assume he's playing his normal minutes. And we've been seeing a lot of minutes for Aaron Gordon lately. But he's been involved this year as a playmaker more than he was in the past. And then they've been using him as the backup point guard as well. Now you have Chase and Randle out, so those minutes are available for Gordon. I think that especially on FanDuel at only 6,300, he looks like a pretty good value here. There's obviously risk. It's a tough matchup against Denver. It's one of the lowest implied totals on the slate for Orlando. But I do think Gordon's underpriced. You're also getting, Evan Fournier getting a bunch of minutes now. Vooch is a very good player, contributes, points, rebounds, assists, you name it. But he is still priced up a little bit from when Gordon and Fournier were out earlier in the year. His salary really hasn't come all the way back down. So I think Gordon's the guy that looks the most appealing. I do want to point out Al-Farouq Aminu at 3,800 on DraftKings, though. We just talked about Paul Millsap at 3,900 as a kind of not exciting, not super appealing value option, but one that makes sense to fill out your lineups. He's getting almost 20% ownership while Al-Farouq Aminu gets 2%. Aminu played 28 minutes last game and potentially lost a couple minutes in a blowout. He's not a super productive player, but neither is Paul Millsap. Millsap has volatile minutes. Aminu's minutes, he'll probably play 25 to 28, somewhere in there. There's not a whole lot separating Aminu from Millsap, I don't think. Certainly not enough that you should be getting 10x the ownership going to Paul Millsap.
Oh, God, Al-Farouq Aminu.
I
get it. I understand it. He's just never been a particularly good per minute guy. Although this season, how long does this continue, right? He's been, what is he, like 0.75 fantasy points per minute?
This season?
Yeah, I think he's around that.
Yeah, ballpark.
Yeah, so on DraftKings, he's exactly 0.75 DraftKings points per minute. That was just math in my head.
Nice.
Not bad, right? I told you I can't do math I can't do back of the napkin math, but I can do it in my head. And I just got really lucky. So the difference between him on DraftKings and Millsap right now is like, I think Millsap doubling his ownership. Are you talking about FanDuel ownership?
No, DraftKings, Millsap is 10xing Aminu's ownership.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Millsap's 20.
Aminu's at 2 now. Okay. Yep. You're right. Wow. Yeah. That's a huge difference. All right. So I get it. Anything else from Orlando?
No. And just to clarify, I'm not saying like Al-Farouq Aminu is the key to the slate.
No, but if he plays 27, 28 minutes.
Yeah. He's just not a drastically different player than Millsap.
So Washington's got a pretty bad draw here against New York, a good team. I know Josh and I had a conversation today briefly about whether or not they're a top 10 defense at the end of the year. I tend to believe they will be. I think this is a legitimately good defense. I don't maybe think they're top 3, but I think they sit top 5 on the season. They also just play at a crawling pace. So you have a Washington team that plays at the fastest pace in the league going up against a team that plays extraordinarily slow. Slowest team, they're the slowest team in the league by over about 1.5 possessions per 48, Adam. Meanwhile, the Wizards are the fastest team by about 1.5 possessions per 48. So not a good matchup if you're the Washington Wizards, especially for some of these pay-up options like Westbrook and Beal. Yeah,
it's a pretty tough spot for the Wizards. Russell Westbrook's been very good this year, and he's been even better coming out of the All-Star break. I don't know if, his legs are rested, he's fully healthy, whatever, but he's averaged over 1.6 DraftKings points per minute in the 6 games he played with Beal since the break. He's triple doubling constantly, but he's also really expensive. And, the huge piece of news that I alluded to at the top of the show was that James Harden is questionable tonight. Kyrie Irving's out. If James Harden is in, Harden just projects as like the clear top pay-up option.
No question, yeah.
Westbrook is the natural pivot in terms of like ownership and salary. Like if you're building a lineup where normally you would use Harden, it's viable to just put Westbrook in and hope he outscores Harden. But the problem is just that even at Westbrook's elevated rates recently, he's not producing at the same rate that you expect Harden to produce at. And the matchup, like you said, is just so much worse against a Knicks team that even over the last month, they're playing a little bit faster, but that just means that they've been the 6th slowest team instead of the slowest. They're still, they haven't been as good defensively, but they haven't been bad either. And now they have Mitchell Robinson back to protect the rim for someone like Westbrook who can't shoot the ball from outside. So It's still a really tough matchup for Westbrook. He's still really expensive. His ceiling's really high, but I would need a very, very big ownership gap between him and Harden to start considering that.
You're going to get it if Harden plays.
Yeah, so I mean, like right now we have Westbrook at 11%. We have Harden at 38. I mean,
I thought Harden would be like 60, honestly, on this.
Yeah, I mean, Harden was 50% in tournaments last time Kyrie was out. Now he has that Q tag as well. Like we probably won't even have news on Harden when the slate starts. So I just kind of doubt. Plus, you have Westbrook coming off like a 70 or 80 fantasy point game. I think it's one of those situations where, like, Harden's obviously going to be higher owned, but I think it's one of those situations where you're going to have like enough people saying, "Oh, I can't roster the most popular guy, so I'll roster Westbrook," where the gap just doesn't end up nearly as wide as I would like it to be. Like, I would much rather, even in large field tournaments, I would rather be competing with 40% of the field that has James Harden than 15% of the field that has Russell Westbrook, even if Westbrook outscores Harden.
So every single day, and you know this, that I would recommend Alex Len, he plays poorly. And then the very next game, he drops 30 plus. So just to give you an example here, 33 minutes on the 13th. And then I talked about him on the 18th in the same exact matchup, mind you.
Right.
Same matchup. Played 18 minutes, 8 fantasy points. Then the next game, 24 minutes, 33 DraftKings points, then 18, and then 29 again. So by that standard, he's going to play 18 minutes again. But in all seriousness, like we have seen Scott Brooks give Alex Len minutes when things are going well, and he has produced with those minutes in some spots. He had 20 and 9 last time out. He had 13 and 12 3 games back. Granted, that was against Brooklyn and Sacramento. This is against New York, a much less appealing matchup. But at sub 4K, can you still get to some Alex Len just given the potential minutes here?
Yeah, I think especially at his DraftKings price point of 3,900. I mean, he's obviously volatile. Like he started 6 games now where Westbrook and Beal have both been in. His minutes range in those 6 games ranges from 8 to 29. If you exclude the 2 extremes, he's played between 18 and 24 minutes in the other 4 games. He's averaged 1.05 DraftKings points per minute. The matchup's not appealing from a pace standpoint or a defense standpoint, but there are a couple of things to like. For one, it's a New York front court that's probably going to play 48 minutes between Nerlens Noel and Mitchell Robinson. So this game probably isn't going small. And 2, neither of those guys, Robinson or Noel, are really high usage guys where maybe the Wizards would look more to Robin Lopez than Alex Len. So I do think if Len's playing well, he has the potential to stay on the floor, which is really appealing in tournaments. But he is volatile, like you said. It's just another cheap option. He's getting around the 11% ownership, and I think that makes sense on DraftKings.
God Sham God says, so are you recommending him today? No, for that exact reason, I implore you not to play Alex Len. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for Washington?
Yeah, I mean, Bradley Beal's salary is really cheap. I am a little concerned about him, though. He only has a 28.8% usage rate in the 6 games he's played since the All-Star break. I don't know if that's a product of Westbrook just playing better. I don't know if Beal's dealing with a nagging injury. We know he missed 1 game and was questionable for another. But the usage is down. The production is down. It's a tough matchup. I mean, you can still go to Beal in tournaments, but I do think there's reasons to be a little bit concerned about Beal. And then Rui Hachimura, I'm not really that interested at 6K on DraftKings, but he's a $5,200 small forward on FanDuel. He's played at least 36 minutes in 5 straight games. Davis Bertans is still out. The minutes should be there for Rui. He's coming off a game where he played 40 minutes. Small forward's pretty weak on FanDuel. I think he's a good value there.
Okay. What about on the opposite side of this, the New York Knicks, the slowest team facing the fastest paced team in the league, a bottom 5 defense. So slowest team, top 5 defense, fastest team, bottom 5 defense. It's 2 totally different worlds here. Now, do you have any news on Derrick Rose? Everything I saw is he passed through COVID protocol, but he needs to be conditioned first before he can return.
Yeah, that's what I've seen. He's not on the injury report, but he did confirm that he actually had COVID. It wasn't like a, close contacts thing.
Yeah.
And apparently, based on his comment that it was 10 times worse than the flu, I'm guessing
it sucked.
Yeah. So it sounds like he had symptoms. I don't know if he's playing. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how. I'm assuming he's not playing. 24 minutes or something like that. I'm not assuming Rose makes a big difference. But at the same time, that news does matter because it affects the minutes of guys like RJ Barrett. And then also we're waiting on Elfrid Payton news as well.
Right. So I guess it makes things a little bit difficult. We do know that Emmanuel Quickly is slated to play this game. He's probable with that ailing ankle. Elfrid Payton hasn't played in a while now. He hasn't played since the 11th of March. So how are you actually breaking this team down right now? I think the easiest way, and you can do things differently if you like, but I think that the easiest way is to start with Julius Randle, who has just been remarkable this season and might finally soon begin to get the credit that he deserves.
Yeah, Randle's the guy that I really don't care who else is playing for the Knicks. I really like Randle here. When the Knicks were fully healthy before this recent rash of injuries, Randle was the one guy on the team whose playing time wasn't affected. You're still getting 36 to 38 minutes consistently from him. He's averaging about 1.3 or more fantasy points per minute this year. And then he's just the kind of guy that should benefit so much from this matchup against Washington because he's a high usage guy. So he's going to get his shots up against an inefficient defense. He should be able to score at a higher rate. He's a high assist guy, and the Knicks as a whole should be able to score more efficiently against this defense. So you would expect that more of Randle's potential assists turn into fantasy points. And he's also a good rebounder. He's 12th in the league in rebounds per game. Washington is allowing, I believe, the 6th most total rebounds per game over the last month. So everything just sets up great for Randle. He plays huge minutes. The salary is expensive, but it's not too expensive, I don't think. I really like Randle here. Beyond that, a lot really depends on news. Like RJ Barrett is somewhat interesting because small forward's not a great position tonight, but he is someone that we've seen affected when the Knicks are at full strength. Early in the season, he was playing 36, 37 minutes. Over the last month, he's played 33 and a half. But for that stretch where the Knicks were fully healthy, he was playing like 30 minutes a night. He's about a 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy, and he's just not someone that's good enough that I want to pay this salary if he's only going to play 30 minutes. But if you're going to give me 33 to 35 minutes against the Wizards, I do have some interest in Barrett. And then Quickly, obviously, is dependent on Elfrid Payton. Only $5,800 on DraftKings. Only played 25 and a half minutes against the Sixers last game with Payton out. But I do think that you're getting at least 26 around there, if not more. Should certainly play more if he's playing well. Rose's status, affects him to some extent too. But that's, another piece where it's really going to matter who else is active for the Knicks.
OG Stephen Davis brings up a great question, though. He says, any less love for Quickly since Westbrook is guarding him, Adam?
No.
It was a clear troll job.
And the way the Wizards have been doing things recently, you could actually see Westbrook on Randle's son.
Yeah, I know.
They were using, not even joking, they were using him on Giannis.
Were they?
Yeah, he was just fronting Giannis and actually Giannis still had monster games, but there was a stretch or two of that game where Westbrook basically was like, I'm guarding him, and actually kind of made things difficult.
Okay. It was clearly trolling, though, because
of
how ridiculous those questions have been recently. Anything else on the Knicks?
No.
All right. Let's talk about the Lakers and the New Orleans Pelicans. Los Angeles Lakers. So you've got no LeBron, you've got no Anthony Davis, and this is where things begin to get interesting. If you look at our ownership projections, you can get all of that, including player projections, top stack tool, boom bust tool, lineup builder, the fantasy cruncher add-on, all of the premium articles, all of our tools for every sport, right? Not just basketball, baseball, football, hockey, NASCAR, PGA, MMA, esports, college basketball. We got tools for all of them, created by Alex Baker himself. Awesemo, you've seen him, I'm sure, winning quite a bit of money with these exact tools right here at awesemo.com/join. If you want to look at them, that's where you go. And if you do decide to join, right, you want to see what we've got, you want to check these tools out, the ownership and everything else we have, whether you're an MME player, whether you're a single entry, 3-max, whether you're a cash player, we got something for everyone. And we've got subs for everyone, whether it's $4, less than $4 a week. You can do an annual, one sport, all sports for a week, month, year, whatever it is, we got you. And we have a premium Slack chat, which I would urge you to check out. A cool community there for sure. And also the premium Slack chat office hours where you've got the pros, guys at Awesemo answering your questions in a much better scenario than in YouTube chat. So go to awesemo.com/join if it sounds like something you want to check out. And if you have any questions, you can DM me on Twitter with subscription questions specifically. So Lakers getting a lot of ownership, but not as chalky as you would think on DraftKings, Adam. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they were certainly preemptively priced up with this LeBron James news. But I'm definitely interested in talking about Trez, who's a 1.35 DraftKings point per minute guy without Davis and without LeBron, and Dennis Schroeder, who's well over a fantasy point per minute as well.
Yeah, Kuzma in that mix too. Trez, this matchup kind of scares me a lot because Steven Adams should make life miserable for him, right? You're talking about someone that doesn't score away from the basket, is significantly undersized compared to Adams. But at the same time, the Lakers don't have anyone bigger to go to. So I think if Harrell doesn't play a lot of minutes, it would be that the Lakers just go like 5 out and they go Markieff Morris and they try and shoot Adams off the floor. But the thing that makes me come back to Harrell, even though I am kind of scared of the minutes here, is he has been so productive without Davis and without James. He's averaged 1.31 DraftKings points per minute. His salary is coming up a little bit, but even if you give him 30 minutes instead of the like 34 and a half he played last game, he still projects as a really good play at those salaries. He obviously has the potential to play more, and it's an overall weak New Orleans defense. So I do like Harrell. I think it's just important to like point out how things could go south, but I do think he's a good play here. Dennis Schroeder only played about 29 minutes last game, but he dealt with some foul trouble. Then he lost a couple minutes at the end of the game to blowout. I think barring foul trouble or garbage time, you're getting 33, 34 minutes at least from Schroeder. He's averaged 1.05 DraftKings points per minute without James or Davis this year. So he looks like a strong option. And then you have Kyle Kuzma, who played 36 minutes last game, has almost a 26% usage rate without those two on the floor going back to last season, about a 12% rebounding percentage, 12% assist percentage. Should get around a fantasy point per minute here. I think, especially again, small forward, not the strongest position. It makes Kuzma look pretty good. So those three look like the priorities for me from the Lakers. And then, you start getting into guys like Alex Caruso, Talen Horton-Tucker, who became very expensive since their last game. Still guys that, you can get to if you're building a lot of lineups, but I don't think they look quite as important. KCP in that conversation as well, but I don't think they look quite as important as guys like Harrell, Kuzma, and Schroeder.
Okay. Would you put Kuzma number 1 on FanDuel, which is where ownership has him projected right now?
At small forward, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then you got Trez and Caruso around there. It does feel like Dennis Schroeder's ownership is not low, but given the situation that you have no LeBron and no Anthony Davis, it seems a little bit lower than I thought it would be. Any reason for that?
He's kind of expensive, I guess, at $7K, but also like
even on FanDuel or even on DraftKings, he's 6,600. Doesn't seem that expensive.
Oh yeah. I meant specifically FanDuel because on FanDuel, Ben Simmons is really cheap. Damian Lillard's really cheap. Alex Caruso is almost the min. He's still a good play there. And 6,600 on DraftKings, I think, is good as well. Do you have FanDuel ownership in front of you?
Yep.
What's Michael Porter at compared to Kyle Kuzma? Because they're the same price, and I think they look really similar.
Michael Porter Jr. is at 21.2%. And you asked about him and Kuzma?
Yeah.
Kuzma's at 24.9.
Okay, yeah. I'll say I think they should be close.
Yeah, not far off at all. Michael Porter Jr. is 6,500. Kyle Kuzma also 6,500. So that's where you're drawing the comparison. Just to dive in, because we have a full hour here. We can spend a little bit more time talking about these games. When it comes to the lesser, well, I shouldn't even say lesser expensive because THT's up to 5,500 now. And then on FanDuel, he's coming in at 6,000. So I can't even say that they're all that inexpensive. Are there any value options down here? Guys that haven't seen a big price hike. You mentioned Caruso, understandably so. Any other guys that might get enough opportunity in this rotation today that could be worthwhile at low ownership?
Yeah, I think Caruso and KCP are similar. Like neither one's a very good fantasy point per minute producer. Caruso is a little bit better, about 3/4 of a fantasy point per minute, whereas KCP is like 2/3. But Caruso probably plays 24, 25 minutes. KCP most likely plays like 30 or 31. And KCP is the type of guy that can take advantage of this matchup against the Pels, knock down some extra threes. So either of those guys are fine. If you get 20 points, you're not going to be surprised. 18 to 20 points is kind of where you expect them to end up, but they will get opportunities here. If you're looking to leverage against Montrezl Harrell's ownership, I think Markieff Morris is the guy. The problem is just that Keith is priced up here. Like I was saying, if Harrell doesn't play big minutes tonight, it would mean that the Lakers just basically did what they did against the Hornets and went, 5 out and with a small lineup, in which case you could potentially be looking at, like 34 minutes or something for Markieff Morris. The problem is just that, I don't really want to take that gamble when I'm paying a premium to do it.
All right. So this game, by the way, only a 221.5 total. Lakers are getting 6 points in New Orleans. So a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Lakers still, even without LeBron, are going to be a pretty good defensive team. Offensively, they're going to struggle. There's no question about that. But the Pels on the other side, You've got Ingram, you have Zion, Lonzo Ball's questionable, but right now I have him in. Let's start it off with the top, where ownership is coming in the heaviest on New Orleans, which is right with Brandon Ingram, but not a lot, right? 14.3% on DraftKings isn't all that crazy. On FanDuel, he is a little bit higher at 19.8, but right now the highest projected owned player on both sites is Brandon Ingram, thanks to a mid 7K price point.
Yeah, and I think the position helps there as well. I mean, small forward is just not that good. And Ingram is someone, he has his share of disappointing games just because there's so many guys on the Pelicans that do a variety of things well. Like Lonzo Ball gets assists, Bledsoe gets assists, Zion now gets assists. And so, there's guys that can take those away from Ingram. Zion cuts into his usage a bit, but the entire team is good at rebounding. So you still see some games where like Ingram disappears more than you would expect from someone with his talent level, but the ceiling is still really high, and those games help keep the salary down. He's got about a 21% assist percentage in the games that he's played with Zion this year. He's got a 28% usage rate. You should get about 35 minutes from him in this game. So I do like Ingram here. I do think he should be the highest owned guy on the team. Beyond that, like I always like Zion. I'm very happy with what we've seen from him recently. Over the last month, he's got a 32% usage rate. His assist percentage is up to 19%. He's averaged 1.35 DraftKings points per minute. Everything looks really good. The problem is just that, like you said, even though the Lakers aren't as imposing without Davis and James, I still don't think it's a plus spot for Zion. And more importantly than that, he's close enough in salary to Julius Randle in a great spot. And then there's some value at power forward as well. So I think it makes it difficult to prioritize Zion. But if you get to him in some tournaments, I think that's fine. Steven Adams could certainly have success on the rebounding front against an undersized front court, like I said. But center is pretty deep today, and there are some similarly priced guys to Adams that I like more. So the big injury news, like you said, Lonzo Ball questionable, missed their last game. Nickeil Alexander-Walker started and played 30 minutes. If Ball's out again, Alexander-Walker becomes one of the best values.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And the only thing that kind of sucked is he didn't close.
Yeah.
But he still got 31 minutes, and I'm not upset about that. If he ended up closing that game, he'd have played like 38, 37 minutes. So
yeah, I almost look at that rotation as a positive. Like, would it have been nice if he closed? Yeah, but if he's going to play 31 minutes in the games that he does not close, that's a pretty good sign.
Yeah, sure. And it also meant that he got some minutes away from the Ingram Zion pairing as well, right? I think he played like 7-8 minutes, probably 8 or 9 minutes with only one of them on the floor. So
yeah, he subbed out early and then came back in and played with Zion.
Yeah, twice.
Yeah.
That would make for a very solid option. You'd have to think, right, that he would become one of the chalkiest plays on the slate, if not James Harden.
Yeah, but without a doubt. And because like it's going to be so easy to get to, Harden, you at least have to pay for him. Alexander Walker is going to be that piece that lets you get Harden.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not like he wasn't involved at all. He got up 15 shots.
Yeah, he scored a ton.
What's up?
He scored a ton.
Yeah.
That was the slate. I ended up doing well on that slate. It was the, Saturday afternoon slate, I think. But for a while, he was outscoring Jokic, and I had Jokic, and it was really pissing me off. Like, he had a good game.
I wonder if he did anything in the way of actual, like, potential assists.
Potential assists, I'm not sure. Actual assists, I know he didn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe he got unlucky. I don't know. Pulling it up right now. I'm just curious to see if he had really any involvement whatsoever, or if it was just shooting, because I'm beginning to think it was the latter. In that game, he had 4. So, yeah. I would hope that he can get up some shots once again. And by the way, he's got double-digit field goal attempts in each of his last 3 games, of which he played much fewer minutes than he did last time. What about Lonzo?
If he plays,
if Lonzo's in, we talked about Alexander, Adams, Ingram, Zion. What about Lonzo if he's active? Because he was getting a huge run.
Yeah, he was. I think it's just a really difficult price point. There's also obviously the risk that he would be, somewhat limited, which even if that means like 30 minutes, that's enough to where I wouldn't really be interested in his salary. But if you get like 34 minutes from him, he's fine in tournaments, but I wouldn't be going out of my way to pay $6,800 for him.
Courtney, thanks for the super chat. Says Toscano, Morris, or Claxton on FanDuel tournament.
Claxton.
All right. You want to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Or you got anything else from New Orleans?
No, that's it.
All right, let's do it. Phoenix and Miami. Hit that thumbs up while you're watching if you haven't done so yet. Trying to get us to 500 here. And also all of you wonderful people subscribed to the channel as well if you haven't done so yet. Phoenix, Miami, the Suns opened as 1-point favorites, moved a little bit, 2-point favorites, 215.5 total. Abdel Nader is out for Phoenix. That's your big news here, Adam. Aside from that, they are a very healthy team.
Yeah, what an unappealing matchup for DFS. Like there's really good players in this game, but two very, very good defensive teams. The Suns have been playing at a faster pace. Miami's still one of the slowest teams in the league. From the Phoenix side, like you can definitely look to these guys in tournaments. They're just not priorities. Like Devin Booker, he can go out there and light it up against anybody. He's just less likely to do so in this particular game. But shooting guard's not a very good position, especially on DraftKings where James Harden's a point guard. So, Booker in tournaments is fine. Paul in tournaments is fine, but still not guys that I'm prioritizing. DeAndre Ayton's salary is down to $5,900 on DraftKings, $6,500 on FanDuel. There's upside for him there, but he played 32 minutes last game, and that's the only time in the last 9 games he's top 30 minutes. For the season, he's averaged 29.8 minutes in the games that he's played with Paul and Booker. He's averaged 1.1 DraftKings points per minute. So there's a ceiling here, but there's a lot of centers in this price range that I like their spots a little bit better. Jay Crowder is really cheap, starting and playing about 30 minutes per game, but only averaging about 0.75 fantasy points per minute. And then now you assume he's going to produce at a lower rate against the Heat. So nothing that, stands out to me whatsoever outside of the obvious, Devin Booker can score a lot of point type stuff.
Andrew Kang, thank you for the super chat. Says, what's up? Just saying what's up to all the pimps and good luck to everyone. Laffy, I hope Alex lets us keep the diaper fun super chats. Yeah, that'd be cool. And yeah, I saw somebody comment about if you have the Awesemo logo and you finish atop a tournament. So yes, if you do that, you'll win a free month of Awesemo Plus. You got to place in, you don't even have to win. If you place in the top 3 of any tournament with 5,000 plus entries, you will win a free month of Awesemo Plus. Pretty sweet. Like all you have to do is use the avatar. So you just won money and now you get a free one just because you have the avatar. It's pretty cool. All you got to do. All right. So, yeah, Phoenix I didn't anticipate us taking a lot of time there. What about on the Miami side? Jimmy Butler's been a stud. Bam Adebayo is always worth discussing, but if Goran Dragic plays.
He's out.
Oh, did he just get ruled out? Or
yeah,
was he
I think
ruled out a while ago and I missed it.
Yeah.
Okay. So the second one?
Not long before the show.
Okay. So, yeah, I must have missed it. So Goran Dragic out. What are your thoughts here on the backcourt now that he's sidelined?
It opens up more minutes potentially for Kendrick Nunn, but he still played 23 minutes last game, didn't play in overtime. Tyler Hero played 36 minutes, including overtime. So, it gives you a couple of decent options. 4,300 for Kendrick Nunn on DraftKings. I think there's a lot of upside there. There's just also, pretty low floor, even with Dragic out. Hero at 5,700, I'm assuming plays around 32 minutes. So I don't think it changes a ton in terms of guys that I'm prioritizing. Like Miami still has enough bodies that they don't have to play these guys huge minutes. You have Trevor Ariza now who played 19 minutes last game, including overtime. You have Iguodala who played 20 minutes in regulation. Gabe Vincent was in the rotation. So there's still a bunch of bodies here and it's still not a very appealing matchup. I do think Jimmy Butler is worth a mention just because he's been so good this year. The matchup against Phoenix isn't that good, but they are 8th in pace over the last month, which is nice. Butler's averaged about 1.35 to 1.4 fantasy points per minute in the games that he's played with Bam Adebayo this year. And the small forward position, there's decent mid-range options, like Ingram, like Kuzma, like Michael Porter. But when you talk about any of those guys, there's plenty of risk that they kind of just don't have good games. There's a decent chance because of the relative lack of options at the position that Butler just outscores all of them by 20 points and gives you an advantage on on FanDuel, especially where you have to roster 2 of them. So, I don't think he's a top option. He's not someone that I anticipate getting to in cash games. I haven't built a lineup yet, but I'm just assuming I won't. But in tournaments, I think he is one way you could look to be contrarian and still get a high ceiling.
Okay. Yeah. So would you say this is your least favorite game?
Yes.
It was okay. Would you say you have any top options from either side? In context, the entire slate.
No, I would say as far as me liking the games, it's similar to the Denver game, except at least the Denver game has Jokic.
Okay. A couple more super chats. Gene, what's up, Gene? Made $7.12 thanks to you guys donating my entire profit. Thanks, bro. No, Gene's always atop the league. I always see him sending us screenshots. Lillard time. First two people in at any position when making a FanDuel tournament large field. Adam, if you had to answer, who would your first two players be? And by the way, only 6 games today, so I'm happy to take these questions a little bit more fluidly throughout the show.
I didn't hear the question.
First two players in at any position when making a FanDuel tournament large field. I know you do things differently, of course, but
yeah,
basically who your two top exposure players on FanDuel would be. That'd be the easiest way to put it.
James Harden. Harden's the one that, really stands out. I think then there's not really one guy that really stands out to me on FanDuel outside of Harden. So Harden would be number one. Then I think you're probably looking to I do like Aaron Gordon in tournaments actually a lot at 6,300.
Okay.
It feels like he's probably not my second favorite play, but I do think he's a very good play.
And if Lonzo out, it'd be Alexander as your second man.
Yeah. What position is he?
Yeah, I was just going to check the same thing.
He is not a point guard.
Is he a shooting guard? He is shooting guard, yeah.
Yeah. $4,900 shooting guard.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, I mean, shooting guard is not great. Like Harden takes one of the spots, obviously, but then like Horton Tucker is expensive. Bruce Brown, we'll talk about, I think is a really good play. But overall, shooting guard's not great on FanDuel. So yeah, Alexander Walker would be good.
Yeah, and then if Harden's out, Bruce Brown is the guy.
Yeah, if Harden's out, this whole slate goes to shit, and there's just ridiculous value.
Yeah. Well, and I know this seems almost irrelevant, but if Landry Shamit's not traveling with them either, so that takes another player that was actually getting decent minutes out of the rotation that would have played a really big role in the circumstance of Irving and James Harden being out.
Yeah, I wrote Landry Shamit's name in the deep dive today twice, which I can almost guarantee is 2 more times than I've written it the entire season.
There you go. Right. Because it actually makes a difference. So let's talk about Philly and Golden State then. We can keep this one moving. The Philadelphia 76ers are facing the Warriors. Both Curry's out. That's kind of disappointing. Seth Curry, he's on ice for this one, and Curry's on the shelf. And Steph Curry is on the shelf as well. So Philadelphia 76ers without Embiid. Ben Simmons came back last game. They tried everything they could to give that game to the Knicks. All the Knicks fans still blamed it on the refs, by the way. I mean, come on. Sixers did everything they could to give you that game on a platter. Sixers are 4-point favorites, though, Adam, 217 total. Without Embiid, you look at the price points, high to mid 8Ks on Tobias and Ben Simmons. Do you like getting to them tonight against Golden State? Yeah,
I think that the salaries for the most part have adjusted to where they're close to correct. There's at least some downside there. You can see how an $8,500 Tobias Harris would fail. You can see how an $8,800 Simmons would fail, but there is still a pretty high ceiling too. You're expecting big minutes from both of those guys. Simmons has averaged about 1.3 DraftKings points per minute without Embiid this year. Harris around 1.25 fantasy points per minute. Both of them see an uptick in usage. The rebounding numbers look good. Assist numbers look good for both guys. And Golden State's played at the 3rd fastest pace over the last month. So it is still a spot that I'm interested in. I do still think these guys have high ceilings. Simmons at 8,200 on FanDuel stands out as a very, very good price tag. And then DraftKings, you can roster him at small forward, which is pretty useful as well, I think. So those two stand out as, the obvious top options for me from the Sixers. But Dwight Howard's still reasonable, especially 5,400 on FanDuel. He played about 28 minutes in regulation last game. He's averaged between 25 and 26 minutes per game without Embiid this year. And he's over a fantasy point per minute guy. So, he's another one where, 6K on DraftKings is a little bit more expensive than I'm comfortable paying, but he can still pretty easily put up a good game there. 5,400 again on FanDuel looks better. Furkan Korkmaz drew the start last game, played 28 minutes. He is the flat minimum at shooting guard on FanDuel, so certainly someone you can look to there if he starts, especially if Lonzo Ball is in and you don't have the Nickeil Alexander-Walker piece. You can look to Korkmaz to open up some salary. 4,500 on DraftKings I don't think is nearly as appealing.
Okay. Mr. Pibb, any love for the 2014 Waste Management Open winner? Look it up if you don't know. By this point, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I forget what his name is, but what is it, Stadler?
Kevin Stadler, I think.
Stadler? Yeah.
I think so, Kevin Stadler. Yeah, I love him tonight. Thanks, though, for the super chat. Hey, if you're going to give us $5 every time just to have me read a question about the same golfer that doesn't play basketball, that's okay. Appreciate you. Where was I? Philly?
I don't know. I wasn't listening. Yeah, Philly.
You were listening. I didn't say anything outside of the Kevin Stadley thing. You were talking. Do you like any, like, okay, so Korkmaz, and unfortunately I wasn't listening to the Philly analysis, so if I repeat myself or repeat you, please forgive me. Do you have any interest in the non-high priced guys for Philly today?
Not really. I mean, like Shake Milton probably plays 26 minutes or so.
Did you talk about this?
No, I didn't. I
didn't think so. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. I mean, I talked about Howard and I talked about Korkmaz, but I left off Milton and Danny Green. Like Milton's those guys are both.
He's just expensive.
Yeah, like they're both fine. Like you're probably getting 26 minutes from Milton. You're probably getting 30 to 32 minutes from Danny Green. They both have a higher ceiling because of Embiid being out. But, you know, $4,900 for Danny Green on DraftKings, like that's never something that I'm going to say is a clear top play unless it's like that one game where they had 8 players and he played 50 minutes. You know, outside of that, you're not really going to be looking to Danny Green there.
No, Danny Green had taken like one shot until there were 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter last game. So
yeah, like you don't see the ceiling's higher because like if Danny Green's shooting well, Embiid's not out there demanding the ball anyway, but the average production is not that much higher because you still just have a lot of that usage funneling to Simmons and funneling to Harris.
Well, sure, and it's not just that. He has 18 stocks over his last 4 games.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot. So yeah, 30 plus DraftKings points, 32 actually, really consistent. Got to give him credit for that in 3 straight. But last game he had 8 stocks, then 3, 2, and 5. If you're going to do that, and he is a very good defensive player, he's a solid enough on-ball defender too. Like he can get it done. You need him to hit those corner threes though. And if he can do that, you're going to get a decent game from him. But I think really it goes back to what you said. What are you comfortable paying for him? If you're looking at the box scores, you're like, oh, Danny Green's been great recently. But we all know that Danny Green's floor is one of the lowest in the league, especially for a guy that's almost $5,000.
Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of guys that you can roster in that price range that are risky that give you, a better range of outcomes, I think, than Green.
Would you say top options on Philly? Are there any legit top options for you on DraftKings or FanDuel?
Ben Simmons on FanDuel for sure at 8,200. DraftKings, I like Simmons and I like Harris, but top options might be pushing it a little bit.
Okay. And to answer your question, Ross, a stock is a block or a steal. It's much easier to talk in that contest from a DFS perspective because they're each, worth the same amount of fantasy points. Golden State, no Steph Curry. So go to ownership on the Golden State Warriors. And you've got Jordan Poole blasting off with ownership right now, along with Andrew Wiggins, which just wildly upsetting seeing that, I'm going to have to consider Andrew Wiggins today. By the way, against a Philly team that I know it's very easy to look at them and say they are not good defensively without Joel Embiid. That's patently false. I mean, I'm not saying that this is a team that is going to be extraordinarily good, like Embiid level defense, right? But they are a good defense without Joel Embiid. There's really no 2 ways around that. I'm just throwing it out there, Adam. It isn't to say that I don't like Poole, that I don't think Curry's absence is huge today, because it is. I'm just saying they're still very good. And it's not a scenario where it's like, oh my God, Joel Embiid, the anchor of their defense, is out. Now you just load up on players against Philly.
Their defense, they've played 9 games this year without Embiid and with Simmons. Their defensive rating is 109.2, which over the last month would put them 8th.
Right. There you go. Still good. It's still top.
Yeah, by comparison, they're first over the last month. But
I know, but it's still a top. What I'm saying, they don't fall off a metaphorical cliff. It drops, but it's still better than average.
Yeah, they don't turn into the Wizards or something.
Exactly. Yeah, the Kings.
Yeah.
So you want to start with Jordan Poole then?
Yeah, I think that especially on DraftKings, you kind of have to. Shout out to FanDuel for actually being quick to increase the price, being quicker than DraftKings to increase the price on someone. But 5,600 on DraftKings. I mean, he's played 34 minutes and 38 minutes in the 2 games that Curry's missed recently. He has about a 23% usage rate. I do think maybe his scoring is like a little bit overstated, like because he has scored a lot of points and he's played really well. But I was kind of surprised that his usage was only 22 to 23%. I was expecting it to be a lot higher. But still, at 5,600, if you're getting that many minutes and you're as involved in the offense as Poole is, he's going to look like a good option. He's 3rd in potential assists over those games as well, behind Draymond Green and behind Andrew Wiggins, but still getting about 7 per game. So contributing enough in the way of assists to help out a little bit. I like him a lot on DraftKings, less interested on FanDuel. You mentioned Wiggins. He's still a good play. I do think it's a tough matchup, like you said, against Philly. I don't think he's the same. He's someone that we're going to consistently see games like we did 2 games ago where he just went absolutely nuts. The ceiling without Curry is clearly higher because, if Wiggins is knocking down his shots, he can just take more of them. Nobody's going to take the ball away. But he's typically not that good of a player on his own. Like you go back to the time with Minnesota, he had bigger games when Cat was out, but on a consistent per minute basis, he didn't change a whole lot. And that's more or less what you've seen without Curry this year too. 1.05 DraftKings points per minute for Wiggins. So definitely someone I'm interested to see where ownership comes up or comes out, because I do think he's a good play, but I do think you should also, it's not like such a good play that you should just be saying, screw ownership, I don't care, I'll play Wiggins. Kelly Oubre hasn't been very good in the couple of games without Curry, but he is someone that I think you could use to leverage against Wiggins. Like if Oubre has a better than normal game, it probably is taking some shots away from Wiggins, potentially from Poole as well. And on FanDuel, the price on Oubre looks really good at 5,600. So I think Poole's the number one guy for me on DraftKings. Wiggins looks good on both sites. Oubre looks good on FanDuel. And then you get to Draymond Green, who is tough for me. Like he's averaged 16 potential assists per game in these games without Curry. The potential assist numbers are great. One potential problem though is that we don't have Steph Curry shooting the ball off of your potential assists. You're going to convert less of them. And this Golden State team
for a while now, everyone would get so excited when Klay Thompson and Steph Curry were out. And you'd look at Draymond Green's rates and numbers, and they really didn't improve all that much.
Yeah, it's an example of like guys being out, does obviously change things, but you have to also think about the skill set of the player you're talking about. You can take everyone off the floor, and Draymond Green's not going to go out there and start, creating shots for himself. And more importantly, he's not going to start making them. But he's still going to get a lot of assists, but he gets a lot of assists even when he plays with Curry. And so taking, the most efficient scorer off the team off the floor can be a little bit of a problem. Still, a high ceiling for him, but I don't think he's really a drastically different play without Curry than he would be with him.
Okay.
And you do have James Wiseman back and Eric Paschall back. So the rebounding numbers for Green most likely take a little bit of a hit here.
What are your thoughts on Wiseman, who's been a good per minute producer, but the minutes are very much in flux?
Yeah, I think the playing time's the issue for me. He's not the worst idea in tournaments. Like people are going to go to Nick Claxton. People are going to go to Alex Len. James Wiseman on DraftKings is only $600 more. It's not crazy to have him in some tournament lineups, but I don't feel very confident that you're getting more than like 22 to 24 minutes from him.
All right. Anything else for the Warriors?
I don't think so. The team, with getting Paschall back, with getting Wiseman back, it does close up a lot of those bench minutes. Whereas like, in recent games, we were kind of guessing like, do you go to Toscano Anderson? Do you go to Damian Lee? With those guys back, I think it's a lot less appealing to go to anything off the bench.
Okay. Hey, by the way, the Late Slate show tonight is an awesome show. And one of the things that's great about it is the fact that there are going to be a lot of nights where you just aren't winning. And now you've got DraftKings and FanDuel and all these sites with just huge late night contests, specifically DraftKings and FanDuel with these huge late night contests, whether it's showdown, whether it's a 2 or 3 game late slate, we have got you covered. Chris Spags taking you home every single night. If you're not tuning into that, you're doing it wrong. It's Spags and Greg Ehrenberg tonight. So that one kicks off at 9 p.m. They're going to take you through everything for these upcoming slates tonight. So whether you're tilting or whether you're having a good night and you just want to add to it, be there, make sure of it. It's at 9 p.m., the NBA Late Slate Show. Check it out with Spags and Greg Ehrenberg. And one more thing, I want to shout out our sponsor, No House Advantage. You get free money for playing over there, $20 when you use the promo code Awesemo. You get free projections for their player props that were built by Alex Baker himself, and the free optimal lineups tool over at awesemo.com when you're playing over there. It's a different format. It's a new format, player prop, tournament style that you probably haven't seen before. The props are static, so they come out early in the day. Unlike other books where, action on them moves them in one direction or another, that doesn't happen here. So if you think you're sharp, if you think you've got it figured out, and you know these sports better than most people, you're going to be able to find those stale lines. You're going to be able to use the player prop tool that we have that's free at Awesemo. You'll be able to use your own intuition, your own data, the optimal lineups tool, and that promo code Awesemo to get yourself $20 in order to start really winning some money over there at No House Advantage. So check it out today. Totally free. To download the app, use the promo code Awesemo, receive $20 free match play bonus, and jump into today's $10,000 contest. That's No House Advantage, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. All right, last one here, Adam. Then we'll turn it over to the Live Before Lock crew. Brooklyn and Portland. Perfect segue into a super chat we got from Jeremy Savage. He says, what pivot game plan if Harden's out? So basically, what would your game plan, what would your pivot be, given that we have two 10 p.m. slates or games, Philly, Golden State, Brooklyn, Portland, if we get news that Harden's out after the other games have locked?
Yeah, I think it ends up being pretty easy because you have Damian Lillard on the other side of the Brooklyn game. Obviously I'd rather roster Harden than Lillard, but Lillard's not a bad consolation prize if Harden's ruled out. You'd want to be getting Bruce Brown into even more lineups than he's already in, Tyler Johnson into more lineups than he's already in. But then you also have Ben Simmons from this game as another pay up option at different positions like that, that you can go to. For example, like thinking FanDuel where Harden and Lillard are not the same position. Potentially, you go down to Bruce Brown and then you can go up to Simmons, you can go up to Lillard, something like that. So it'll be easy enough to make moves just because Harden isn't cheap. So like you're gonna have a lot of salary available. And if he's out, it's gonna open up a lot of plays, but then you also have other good plays in these 10 o'clock games to get to.
All right. Well, there you have it, Jeremy. It's a pretty succinct answer from Adam there. Now, if Harden's in, we just play. I mean, it's very simple. One of the most incredible per minute guys in the world, even when Kyrie Irving is playing alongside him. Take Kyrie Irving off the floor, and then that means that James Harden is contending for touches with Joe Harris, a few minutes from Blake Griffin, Bruce Brown. I mean, there's just nobody on this team, Adam, that can even somewhat come close to contending for opportunities and touches to bring the ball up the court, to facilitate. There's nothing here outside of James Harden. Yeah,
and we've been seeing it for years, going back to Houston, when Chris Paul was out, when Russell Westbrook was out, just the same type of production from Harden consistently, getting around 1.75 to 1.8 DraftKings points per minute. Then you factor in a very good matchup against Portland, who, while they have played at a relatively slow pace over the last month, they've also been the least efficient defense in the league. They're not going to slow down Harden. I mean, don't overthink it. Just play Harden. You can be different elsewhere in your lineup. And then the Hugh tag should keep the ownership down to some extent, as we were talking about before. So if he's in, just play him. Don't overthink it.
All right. What about the rest of these guys with Harden in, knowing that Irving is out and KD still has yet to return?
Yeah. So in the last game that the Nets played without Kyrie, which was last week, it was March 17th against Indiana. You got a starting lineup of Harden, Brown, Shamet, Harris, and Jordan. I think there's a good chance that with Shamet out, you get either Tyler Johnson or Jeff Green back in the starting lineup. But I think that Bruce Brown would be a good play regardless, assuming he starts. He only played about 24 minutes in that game against the Pacers, but he should benefit in terms of playing time from Shamet being out. And he's been a relatively productive player this year, around 0.8 fantasy points per minute. He rebounds pretty well. He scores enough. He gets enough assists that in this spot against Portland, I think he's a really good value. Tyler Johnson, not the same per minute producer, 0.65 DraftKings points per minute overall this season, but he did play 31 minutes off the bench against the Pacers, including closing that game out. And especially on DraftKings, I'm not really that interested on FanDuel if Harden's in because he's 3,900 and, roster construction is just different. But on DraftKings at 3,100, that's the spot, you can pay down and it opens up a lot of other stuff for you in your lineup. Joe Harris is a much more appealing play with Irving out than with Irving in. He's averaged about 0.83 DraftKings points per minute, should play probably 33, 34 minutes at least here in a good matchup. Certainly someone you can look to at small forward on FanDuel at 4,700 and not a terrible option at 5,400 on DraftKings either.
God, the ownership, not just on Harden, but Brown and Claxton. I mean, it's up there today. This is a chalky Nets team.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, I'm sorry, but I think it makes – I know that these guys will make you cringe sometimes looking at these names, but Portland over the last month has had the worst defense in the entire league. It's not like this is a bad matchup either. It's a good matchup, and they're pretty inexpensive, whereas the Lakers, sure, they're without LeBron James, but so many of those guys are twice as much as these value guys for Brooklyn.
Yeah, and on DraftKings, Claxton's 3,900, Len is 3,900. I think Claxton's a better play. I'm not sure he should be twice as owned as Len, or more than twice as owned. But, Claxton has played at least 23 minutes in 3 straight games. I think he's better than DeAndre Jordan. I think he's better than he's someone that should be getting more minutes for the Nets, I think. And he's been productive this year with 1.12 DraftKings points per minute. So I think Claxton looks good. The downside risk for him is that, he's played at least 23 minutes in 3 straight games, but there's no guarantee that is like an active, like that they're intending to get him more run and that's going to continue. You could very easily see him just play 16 minutes tonight. But I think, more often than not that he's going to get substantial run for his salary, because I think he is good. And I think it's easy for him to stay out there. Plus he has been very good at blocking shots, which comes in handy against guys like Lillard and McCollum that drive to the rim so much. So I do like Claxton as a value option.
All right. One more request for 500 likes here on the Deeper Dive coming up immediately after us. It is Live Before Lock. You've got Greg and Terry, right? Yeah, Greg and Terry McBride taking you up till 7 Eastern. So very simply, Adam, outside of James Harden, your favorite players ranked from Brooklyn, because it's important.
Bruce Brown, Nick Claxton, Joe Harris, Tyler Johnson. The rest, I mean, you can throw darts at TLC, you can throw darts at Jeff Green, but
all right, let's talk Portland, and then we'll wrap this up. Damian Lillard, $10,000 flat on DraftKings. CJ McCollum still hasn't played north of 28 minutes in the 4 games that he's returned, but I'm assuming his minutes will get up at some point in the near future. Pretty good matchup. This is clearly the best overall game from a pace and high scoring or high projected scoring standpoint.
Yeah, and I think that there's good plays here. Like, it's not like Brooklyn where they stand out as top options, but Dame's salary is coming down. He's 9,400 on FanDuel, is really nice. 10K on DraftKings is fine. Like his average production decreases with CJ McCollum, but like you said, McCollum hasn't played full minutes in a game yet, and we know that Lillard still has a massive ceiling. You could very easily just see a back and forth between him and Harden throughout this game. The one spot that I find really interesting here is Enes Kanter, 6,400 on DraftKings, 5,900 on FanDuel. I kind of went back and forth on how I thought about him, but I broke it down in detail in the deep dive article. I'm leaning towards thinking that you get normal minutes from Kanter here. He played 16 minutes and 23 minutes in his last 2 games. One of those games was a blowout, but still the playing time was less than you would hope. But both of those games were against Dallas, a team that not only has 2 stretch bigs in Maxi Kleber and Kristaps Porzingis, but also has Luka Doncic, who operates in the pick and roll almost 50% of the time. Kanter's biggest weakness the entire time in the NBA has been that he can't stay on the floor against pick and roll. James Harden operates in the pick and roll a lot. He's like 15th or 16th in the league, but it's only 34% of his possessions. He just has the ball so much that his, pick and roll numbers are high. So I think from that regard, this is a spot where Kanter is going to have a little bit easier time staying on the floor. But also you have DeAndre Jordan and Nicholas Claxton playing the bulk of the center minutes for the Nets. They've attempted a total of 3 3-pointers this season. So you don't have that same issue that you do with Porzingis and with Maxi Kleber spacing the floor and stretching and pulling Kanter out. So like the Blazers could still go small, but I'm more inclined to think that you're getting those 26, 28-minute games from Kanter that he was playing prior to the 2 Dallas games, than that Kanter suddenly is like a 22-minute per game guy. And he's getting virtually no ownership right now.
All right. Well, that'll do it. Thanks to all of you guys for hanging out with us. Live Before Lock coming up next. Oh, and hey, remember, it's super cheap. There's no real reason not to do it if you hang out with us all the time. You can become a member here on the YouTubes at Awesemo. Get some cool badges that go up as the amount of time you've been here increases. Diamond, gold, so all that cool stuff. It looks neat. And you know what? NFTs are the shit right now, right? So why not NFT it with some badges as you hang out with us and watch some Awesemo shows every day? And do it, don't do it, doesn't matter to me. We're just happy to have you here. Good luck tonight, guys. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Deeper Dive.
Cool.
Later, boys.
Yeah.
You. Look up. Look at him warming up. What's going on, man?
I'm just so excited to be working with Terry today.
Seriously, dude. We've been circling this one for a while.
It's been such a tease.
What's going on?
Not too much. Just looking forward to doing the show and informing everybody that James Harden's questionable, because I've seen that come up in the YouTube chat like 80 times.
Yeah, it's only a minor detail for today's slate. Why would people know that by now? Hasn't barely been discussed all day long. Swing those out.
All right.
Cool.
It is the Awesemo NBA Live Before Lock show, and super excited on my part, not only because we're sponsored by No House Advantage, but also I finally get to a Live Before Lock with Terry McBride. And it's not that Terry and I have never done a show before. We did one football show together. We thought it was going to be going on for a little longer. It was a little short-lived because we were pinched on time, but there's been a whole bunch of other things where Terry and I, we thought we were doing shows together, and then it just ended up being a tease. It never worked out, but here we are together, brothers, long lost, finally connected.
That's it, man. We're actually here. We're on the air together. Or, I saw it on the schedule earlier in the week or into last week, whatever it was. And I was like, that's just going to change. That was probably a mistake. That should say Spags or something. And we won't get that one. But yeah, finally made it here. Psyched to be here. Got an interesting slate to talk about, I think. Somehow people out there aren't aware, like we were just saying before, about the Harden news. But I'm sure we'll get into all of that stuff. So it should be a fun one.
Yeah, and I mean, we could just start right with that because, I mean, normally we start at the point guard and guard position anyway. So getting into the guards right now, James Harden is listed as questionable. Personally, I expect him to play. His comments the other day after the game. So if people missed what happened with James Harden, because I think it's a little important to contextualize what the questionable tag is, he very briefly was injured in the Nets' last game and ended up being a totally non-factor and something that didn't even really make headlines because he basically caught it was like a shoulder or an elbow to the face right before the end of the half. He was a little slow getting up. The trainer said to help him off the court, but then the second half started and he was right back out with the team. So I don't think people even realized that he ever got dinged up. And then after the game, he had said to the media that, yeah, hey, like I got a little dinged up. I don't think I'm going to be expected to miss any time. But then lo and behold, the injury report comes out. He's listed as questionable. So I guess we have to maybe weigh some risk they won't play. Personally, I just have him in right now. So how are you handling the Harden situation?
Yeah, I've had him in all day long. I expect him to play. It kind of seemed along those lines to me where, yeah, he landed on the injury report as questionable. But, we've seen LeBron be on the injury report, basically every game up until he actually got injured the other day. So I think it's just one of those situations where they're just maintaining it and they put him on there, but he's most likely going to go. And we have options if he doesn't. The guys on the last show were just talking about that right toward the end of the show, how, we've got some expensive players at the end there of the night with Dame Lillard. So there's some easy, obvious pivots if he doesn't go and some extreme values on his own team. So it's going to be a key inflection point for the slate, I think. But I think we can pretty much project him to go, build our lineups that way, and then deal with it if it changes later on. I think that's the approach I'm taking anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I think because I've seen some people say earlier, I've seen people say it on Twitter, like, oh, James Harden's questionable, I'm just not going to play him. I think that is such a massive mistake if people are just going out of their ways to avoid him. First of all, cash games, you absolutely have to play Harden on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I'm not saying in GVPs you have to have him in 100% of your lineups. I have him in fairly close to that, though. He's in the vast majority of my lineups today. I have him projected for so many more fantasy points than everybody else. And the other thing to consider here, too, is we have a decent amount of value on the slate, especially on the Nets, because both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are out now. So there's cheap guys to roster. It's not that hard to get up to Harden. I just don't have anybody close to him. So James, are you like me where he's in almost all your lineups, or maybe even all of your lineups?
Yeah, I crunched out 1,000 lineups, then deleted some and, went through my whole process before the show. I'll probably end up redoing some of that along the way. But right now I'm at, after the sorting process in Excel, I would be at 96% Harden across 150 FanDuel lineups. So I am massively on the Harden train, and that'll change a little bit, might come down a little bit, but I'm comfortable going into the slate with just a gigantic share of Harden right now. I think he looks spectacular and doesn't compare to anyone on the slate. He blows everybody's doors off right now. So I'm going to have a huge share of them. We'll deal with the changes later on if they come.
Yeah, I'm right with you. And then the other injury situation we have to talk about at the point guard position, Derrick Rose was just ruled out. He is back from the COVID protocol because apparently not yet in game shape. So he's going to be out today. Elfrid Payton is still questionable to play. I feel like he's been questionable maybe 75% of the games this year. Like Elfrid Payton, it's not a Knicks game unless Elfrid Payton is questionable at some point to play. With him questionable, what do you expect from him? And then maybe who do you think benefits and who you're going to want to get to if he does not end up playing?
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting one. Let me just get to the board here and see where Alex had. I always like to go by Alex's minutes on questions like this. So let me pull up the Knicks here real quick. So Alex had Payton at 24 minutes, and that was with Rose getting 25. I would expect a little bit of an uptick, but Payton's been dinged up himself lately a little bit recently. So if he comes into the 28-minute mode and then getting only an additional 4 or something along those lines, and then we see a little bump for Emmanuel quickly. Something along the lines of, he's projected for 15.4. I had him a little bit higher in my minutes, but I think we could see him jump to, 18, 20 minutes at least, as long as he's out there. So I think those two guys benefit. Frankie Ntilikina, we've seen him get some minutes and be relevant in recent slates. He's never a guy I like to go to for DFS. We've seen him pop every now and again, but overall 0.64 fantasy points per minute contributor. I don't love it unless we find out that he's starting. And even then, I don't really like getting to the guy. A guy who's somewhat sneaky in terms of who handles the ball for the Knicks in this situation would be Alec Burks, who is already coming up fairly relevant on this slate for me. I was getting to a decent amount of them with a 24.6 minute projection. I don't know that the minutes really shoot through the roof, but I think just the ball handling duties and a little bit of the usage where he can call his own number a little bit and then just pick up some assists on top of what we already had him projected for. He could see a boost from that. And then Randle might pick up just with his already ridiculous assist share, might pick up a few additional assists just from having to facilitate. So it's kind of all over the place.
Apparently I made a mistake. I didn't even think about this. It was something that our friend Seth in the premium Slack chat was so kindly pointing out to me, like, why do we even have to guess on the Harden injury news? I could just text Steve Nash via Steve Kerr, and right there I'll just have the news. I already have the connection lined up. So yeah. Shame on me for not thinking of that kind of connection I already have.
Come on, man.
Yeah. But for sure, I expect Harden to play. I'm not too concerned about it, despite the questionable tag. Other point guards, I do feel like the point guard position vastly different on FanDuel versus DraftKings. Damian Lillard only 9,400 on FanDuel. He's been priced now for what I think his role is going to be going forward. Now that CJ McCollum's back, he's a little more expensive at 10,000 on DK, but still. This is a guy who just a week ago was, like 10,700 on DK, 10,400 on FanDuel. So his price has come down in a pretty significant way. Now just adjusting for the fact that his usage is probably going to drop a little bit now that CJ McCollum is back in the mix. On FanDuel, I think that pairing him with Harden is a very wise move to get a little bit of extra correlation in GPPs. I thought I was going to do that more on DraftKings, but I didn't end up getting to that all that often, especially because after the Derrick Rose news came out, I'm getting to a lot of Julius Randle, and there just wasn't enough salary to get lineups with Harden, Randle, and Damian Lillard. And I view Randle as a slightly stronger play than Lillard on DraftKings. But on FanDuel, how much are you getting to Damian Lillard, and how much of a priority is it for you to pair him with James Harden?
Yeah, he's in more than half my lineups right now, and I would like to actually get to a little bit more than that, I think. I think it makes a ton of sense just thinking about how that game flow is going to go and everything we like to talk about too. If that game's going off to the point where we expect it to, and it is the highest total game of the night by a pretty wide margin, they're both going to be doing a lot for their teams. And Harden's in the obvious spot. Lillard, the price is appropriate, I think, or maybe even a little bit low for McCollum being back. This is Dame Lillard we're talking about. Sure, the usage isn't going to be as insane because McCollum steps back into like 32% usage, but Dame's still going to be north of 30, still going to be doing all those Damian Lillard things. I think the price is right on FanDuel that you can just start mashing him in the lineups. And he's slightly under-owned in our leverage metric on the boom bust. He's got a 1.4 positive leverage score as of my last update. Might change a little bit as we get toward lock, but that's going to be around level. So I have no problem pushing beyond the field. I'm like 1.5 times the field right now. I'd like to get to twice the field, I think, on the Dame Lillard play. It just makes a ton of sense. And I think it makes sense that you're not getting to it as a pairing as much on DK, just given that they're both point guard only over there and Dame's price is up 10,000 against a lower cap. A little bit more to ask. He's coming up in the optimal about half as frequently on DraftKings. So it makes sense.
Yeah, so something else that's kind of funny about FanDuel is if you look at the pricing for the point guard position, I think Russell Westbrook a little bit too expensive at 11,100, especially in a matchup against the Knicks. But then with Kyrie and Steph Curry out, there's real pricing tiers that kind of differentiate these guys to where if you have certain salaries left over, you only have one guy to really choose from, right? So Russell Westbrook, like I said, 11,100. Kyrie was 9,600 and Curry was 9,000. Both of them are out. So then you've got Damian Lillard at 9,400 and then Ben Simmons down at 8,200. So for me, like Lillard and Simmons are priority plays at point guard. I think that if you're playing cash lineups on FanDuel, those are the 2 point guards you want to roster. But you also get to a point where if you're building lineups and GPPs, you're just going to be forced to play a lot of these guys because there's no other options at the position. So I know you mentioned you're overweight to Damian Lillard. Do you feel the same way about Ben Simmons on FanDuel, who also, to me, to tie it into Damian Lillard, also somebody that vastly different on DraftKings versus FanDuel, because I think that Simmons is a really strong play on FanDuel. I don't have interest in him on DK.
Yeah, very much the same read on Simmons. He's actually higher in my ownership than Lillard. I imagine the two of them are just occupying a ton of my point guard spots together if I scroll down. So thinking just in terms of how those lineups are coming together between the Harden, Simmons, and Lillard ownership, we're talking about three pretty premium players. So we're going to be definitely building in some of these scrubs. I know there's going to be like a lot of Bruce Brown along the way there, but I think just based on how the pricing and just how the slate itself fits together, particularly at the point guard spot, there are just, there's a lack of options and a lack of ways to spend your salary efficiently. So that's what's leading us to these star players at this position specifically. And we've seen the slates come together that way on FanDuel. They're pricing things interestingly the last few days, especially with some of these short slates, where it's really a tricky proposition to spend your money well. There were, plays the other day and again today where, yeah, you can spend 11-1 on Russ Westbrook, but now you're dropping by more than half in terms of the optimal lineup rate in our simulations from those top guys, from Simmons and from Lillard. That's a pretty significant drop. And you're not gaining anything in ownership. You're not gaining anything in leverage. Yeah, he's going to be owned about half as much, but it's equal with how much you're dropping in the optimal lineup rate. So you're getting a similar-ish play. You're paying up to it. Russ Westbrook was actually my bust of the day in our strategy syllabus for FanDuel. So I'm kind of off the Russ train and very much on with Simmons and Lillard. And I'm getting a ton of Michael Carter-Williams as a value as well.
Interesting. So try to sell me on Michael Carter-Williams. I'm not getting to him a ton.
I don't want to try and sell him. I was hoping to try and get someone out of there, to be honest. I think he's coming up a little bit based on, I think we've got some leverage on him a little. And just the fact that he's 4,700 salary-wise, he's coming up with a reasonable median projection now that we know some of the guys in that Orlando lineup are not going to be playing. So I don't love the play. I've been getting to him a ton all year long. And when I get to him, it never makes me comfortable. He's burned me a few times through the year. But just looking at their lineup today, they're going to have Vooch out there. They're going to have Aaron Gordon out there, but they're going to be without his name's escaping me. The kid who used to play for
Jason Randle.
Thank you, Jason Randle, the backup point guard. So I think MCW is going to see a fair amount of run at the point guard spot. He's up to 30.7 minutes in Alex's most recent projection. We're going to get some Aaron Gordon probably playing the backup point guard minutes, but that's not their ideal configuration. So I think if MCW is playing it all well, he could go through that minutes mark that we've got him at 30, maybe smash to a ceiling score against 4,700 at the point guard spot. 0.82 FanDuel points per minute this year. Doesn't need to do a ton for the salary. Has a little bit of work to do, but I think he's a reasonable play there.
All right, guys, don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because also, T. McBee and I, we're not going away after this hour is over. We're going to get to the lock for the normal slate, but we're also going to be sticking around to talk about No House Advantage, some of the props over there. So we'll be doing a 30-minute show after that. And other reason to stick around, too, even if you aren't yet playing on No House Advantage, there's going to be other guys that get ruled out. There's going to be all kinds of other news. For all we know, James Harden, he might end up getting ruled out at 7:15. So the main slate show will be over, but we might have some other things that will be relevant to FanDuel and DraftKings to talk about. So all the more reason to stick around. One more chalk play that I think we need to talk about, and somebody who is different on DraftKings and FanDuel for the opposite reason of somebody like Ben Simmons and Damian Lillard. Jordan Poole is much cheaper on DK than he is on FanDuel. For me, I'm getting to Jordan Poole a little bit on FanDuel, except not as much as I am on DraftKings for a couple of reasons. Number one, like I said, he's a lot more expensive on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. But then also I look at the point guard position on FanDuel, and I'm making Damian Lillard and Ben Simmons the priorities for me at point guard. Whereas then I get on DraftKings and Jordan Poole all the way down to 5,600. He's had a ton of success so far as the starting point guard for the Warriors. It's only been a couple of games, but still, you look at his starts, 2 games, both of them against Memphis. He played 34 and 38 minutes, had a usage rating north of 20 in those games, scored 26 and 25 points, averaged 38 DraftKings points. So the price tag, I think, is about right at 6,500 on FanDuel. I think it's too cheap at 5,600 on DK. So Jordan Poole, do you think that he's a rightful chalk play coming in about 35% projected ownership on DK?
Yeah, he seems like it. That's above and beyond where we had him, at least as of my last update in terms of the optimal lineup and simulations. Totally agree across sites. On FanDuel, kind of off the board for me a little bit. And I think that's because the MCW play for 47 was filling those slots a lot for me as opposed to going to 65. Just give you a little bit more money to work with for a guy that comes up more optimal for us. But on the DK side of things, he's leading the point guard position with his optimal lineup rate. So he looks very good, and you get the opportunity to move him between the guard spots, gives him a little bit of utility over there. The one question is how much he's getting owned. We do have other value plays to go to at both guard spots, and he's getting owned at a negative 13.7 leverage score. Once we start getting past like the negative 10 mark for a guy with reasonable upside and a decent boom score probability from Alex, and we've seen him play very well, like you were saying, and he's not priced exactly where he should be, it's a good play, but it starts to become a little bit concerning for me when we have other reasonable values to go to. And I think there are some of those on the board to start clicking around on the DK side of things. So he's definitely in play. I think I would be around the field, but I might want to start consider a slight undercut. I would probably come in, a little bit above what his optimal rate is, but below what his ownership is. Maybe a little around 25, 28%, somewhere around there, but maybe not to the full 34% that we've got projected for ownership.
So you mentioned other value plays. Who is it that you like as a pivot off of him? It's not a direct pivot, but I definitely as a guard value, somebody who Bruce Brown, I don't really care what his ownership is. I just want to get to all the Bruce Brown with no Kyrie Irving, no Kevin Durant out there. And just the cheap price on Bruce Brown, I think he's going to have to play pretty significant minutes. And even though he's somebody who isn't the best points per minute fantasy producer in the world, it doesn't matter. If you're going to give somebody who's that cheap, like Bruce Brown, 32 to 34 minutes, and I just find it really hard to think that he busts on this slate. So I do agree that in terms of chalk value plays, I think that Bruce Brown is a little bit higher of a priority for me. But is there anybody else that stands out to you as a pivot off of Jordan Poole?
So I think if you want to go down in salary as a point guard only, even if Harden plays, I think at 3,100 on DraftKings, Tyler Johnson is somewhat interesting given the 28-minute projection that we have for him. Only a 0.65 on DK. I don't want to short him. Point per minute producer. He's getting owned around level with what his optimal lineup rate is. But for a guy like that, that's just utility. You're buying utility for almost the min price where you can plug him in, get a reasonable expectation of at least, it's not a big projection, but at least the production that you need from a low cost guy like that, and then have some salary to work with to get to some of these bigger, better plays. So I think he's in play, and I think that jumps up significantly if Harden doesn't go. That becomes extremely interesting at that price if Harden doesn't go. And then Bruce Brown is all over my lineups on FanDuel. He would be all over my lineups on DK. On FanDuel, assuming Harden goes, how much are you willing to play those two together, Brown and Harden?
No real issue with pairing them together. Something that we do get asked a lot, and it'll come up like, how many nets can you play in a lineup together? For this particular slate, a lot of them, especially in cash games. I think you want to have Harden in your lineup. You want to have Bruce Brown. On DraftKings, I agree with you. I like Tyler Johnson. I don't even Tyler Johnson projected like ridiculously well. I'm scoring about 18 DraftKings points. That gets him to almost half of my lineups. And it's just because I'm trying to not trying to, but I just end up that my optimal lineups are a lot of stars and scrubs builds because I have Julius Randle projected really well now that Derrick Rose is out. James Harden obviously projects really well because of all the other stars on the team out, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. So I have a bunch of lineups that have two studs in them. And then I just get to the cheap guys, and Tyler Johnson, for me, even only getting 18 fantasy points, ends up being somebody who's going to probably end up on the optimal lineup, for me at least, a lot more than what it is for most other people. Right now, Tyler Johnson only project for 14% ownership, but it's something I've mentioned before about some value plays on recent slates. Sometimes it's not as much about how that individual value play performs. It's about the players that it allows you to get to them and how they perform. So as long as Tyler Johnson doesn't totally suck, like if he scores somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 to 18 DraftKings points, and if Harden scores 65 fantasy points, if Julius Randle scores 55, if Damian Lillard scores 60 fantasy points or something like that, then you're going to need to get those guys in the lineups. And the only way you could do that is if you roster somebody like Tyler Johnson. So just the way the slate makes up, that's something that has me getting to Tyler Johnson. Any other shooting guards, cheap, expensive, somewhere in between that you're getting to at a decent clip?
Shooting guards. Let's see. Sorry, you caught me trying to update the boom bust totals. I am getting on the FanDuel side of things. Wow, not many. So I'm getting so much Harden ownership on FanDuel that my shooting guard, I am like 30 people down the list. Looks like I'm getting to some Furkan Korkmaz. Who else? There must be somebody missing from this list that's not sorting properly here because I'm not. I was getting to some THT because I think he's an interesting value on the Lakers today, but actually not quite as much as I want. So I might bump him a little bit. It looks like something funky is going on in this list, though. So let me jump over to Fantasy Cruncher, and I can give you a better answer on that. Bruce Brown was the other obvious answer. That's why he wasn't coming up, because the junior doesn't come up in my stupid list here. So
Yeah.
Bruce Brown was the other answer.
They're out to get you. The players with the suffixes in their names. It's just a T McBee a trip up they've got in there. Yeah, that's the thing. Also, FanDuel different than DraftKings. We look at the shooting guard position because I think that Bruce Brown and James Harden are such superior options to the other guys that who are available. So Korkmaz, somebody who's in my player pool, but I have less than the field of. Taylor Norton-Tucker in my player pool, but I have less than the field of. Andrew Wiggins, we've seen him play really well when Steph Curry's out, but I find it hard to get to a ton of him when I'm really prioritizing Bruce Brown and James Harden on FanDuel. On DraftKings, we get some other options. Evan Fournier is somebody that I'm overweight to the field on, especially now that there is no Terrence Ross in the mix. It's just we could expect there to be a little bit extra playing time to go towards Evan Fournier. And we've seen that over the last 3 games. Evan Fournier, 34, 35, 35 minutes. Fournier scored at least 36 DraftKings points in 4 of his last 5 games. And Evan Fournier, earlier in the season, we saw games where the Magic were missing players, like when Fultz first got hurt, and then Terrence Ross was hurt. Michael Carter-Williams was hurt. And Fournier was a pretty good points per minute producer, but one thing that held him back from a fantasy standpoint is that he was only playing like 28, 29 minutes per game. That's not an issue now. Evan Fournier is now playing 34, 35 minutes in close games. We're going to talk about the Aaron Gordon situation in a second, because who knows, maybe he gets traded at some point during the night. We know he's on the trade block. That would only mean more usage going to Fournier, but given the amount of minutes that Evan Fournier is playing right now, I think that he's somebody who's also a pretty strong play at shooting guard on FanDuel. Obviously a little different on DK because he doesn't have shooting guard eligibility, but Evan Fournier, any strong thoughts on him?
Yeah, definitely think he's in play across sites, given the positional differentiation that we get with him. So shooting guard on DK, small forward on FanDuel. I was getting to him on FanDuel at that position. And I think based on everything that you just went through with him being back into full minutes, Alex has him in almost 36 minutes tonight, so full run. And if we get that weird Aaron Gordon trade, or if Gordon's just, maybe they don't give him quite as much run because he's a little bit disgruntled. Other people are thinking maybe they feature him. And somebody asked us that question in Slack. Do I think that makes him more incredibly featured at the point, at the backup point? Not necessarily. Everybody knows what Aaron Gordon's skill set is at this point. So I think more likely they maybe protect their asset instead of running him out there for something more than what we would expect from him normally. But if we do see them limit him, I think that could benefit a guy like Evan Fournier, who is coming up already pretty good on both sites. So yeah, I would be on that play across the industry.
All right. So just because I think it's now a good transition point, talking about Aaron Gordon getting into the forward position. We've seen this brought up a lot. And I know I've had this asked to me a couple times on Twitter. I've seen people bring it up in the YouTube chat where people saying, you can't play Aaron Gordon because he's going to get traded, or you have to play Aaron Gordon because it's a showcase game for him. I know that we had Rabashua in our premium Slack chat. He asked both of us in tag, do you think that Orlando is showcasing Gordon for a trade, and will that let him run point most of the time? So here's what I think about all this. There's a lot of narratives, and it's going both ways. We have people telling us that you cannot play Aaron Gordon because he's about to get traded. We have other people telling us you have to play Aaron Gordon because he's about to get traded. I think ultimately it has no impact, right? Like, I mean, maybe it does, but I won't know until after the game's over. Obviously, if he gets traded midway through the game, that's a disaster for his fantasy value. But if there's some situation where he's motivated to play harder, that's going to be a narrative after the game if he plays well. If he has a bad game, people are going to say he was distracted because he wanted to be traded. I don't know how he's going to react to this news. He demanded a trade from the Magic yesterday. It is an important storyline. But unless he gets traded, we find out he's sitting, which, by the way, that is a possibility. We might find before the game that, hey, he's resting. And certainly if we find out that Aaron Gordon is not in the starting lineup, that's a massive red flag. But as the slate currently stands, I'm assuming Aaron Gordon's playing, and I like Aaron Gordon as a play on the slate. So what do you make of all the news and everything surrounding Aaron Gordon?
I'm trying not to sweat it. I'm getting to massive shares of Aaron Gordon on FanDuel. So obviously I like the play. I like the player. And I'm just not going to worry about the news. I try not to worry about narratives in general. It's something I talk about a good amount. You and I hit on a lot of the same subjects when we go through these things. I think it's especially when we have no idea how to quantify it or even what it means. Like, there are some narratives where you can say, all right, yeah, this is exactly what it means because this guy specifically hates that team that he used to play for, and he was on Twitter talking about it. I still don't take that into account because I still don't know how to quantify that. For something like this, where we don't even know what side of the fence it's going to come down, we just have to take it off the board and not worry about it. Just play the numbers unless we have something specific by which we can operate, like Aaron Gordon not being in the starting lineup. Or, yeah, we find out 2 minutes before lock that he got traded. then we can act. But until then, fire away on all cylinders for Aaron Gordon for me. I'm just going to not worry about the news.
Yeah, and then some other news that we did get from the news god himself, Negro Loco, Elfrid Payton is going to be available to play tonight. So I don't think that Payton plays a full allotment of minutes, except it's significant just in the point that if he was out, I think we could have been looking guys like Emmanuel Quickler or Alec Burks be playing much bigger minutes. So right now we have Elfrid Payton will be available to play tonight. So that is notable. Yeah, I'm on Aaron Gordon right now. And I know some people have said that Aaron Gordon is starting, which yeah, as of now he is, but we've seen weird things happen around trade deadline. By the way, I do expect Aaron Gordon to play. I don't expect him to be traded at some point during the game, but I do think it's worth monitoring and not just setting your lineups and then saying like, oh, Aaron Gordon's for sure playing. Like if we get news at 6:55, the Magic made a starting lineup change, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world. So I was just using that as an example of something to keep an eye on.
For sure. And as far as the showcasing thing, I mean, do you worry about that? Like whether or not they're showcasing? To me, nobody in the league is trading for Aaron Gordon based on how he plays tonight. Whether he goes out there and scores 2 points and pulls down 0 rebounds, or he goes out and has a monster game. Like no GM is making their opinion on him based on tonight. So I don't think the showcase thing really matters outside of the minutes. And we have no news on that.
So Aaron Gordon has been in the league for, I don't know, what, 6 years now? Right. Yeah. So if you're looking at Aaron Gordon's career and you're throwing out everything that's happened over the last 6 years, and you're just going like, oh my God, look at all this great stuff he did. Oh my God, Aaron Gordon could dunk. Look at who would have thought that? Like, oh my God, Aaron Gordon, a nice dunk. Like if teams are basing their total, like you said, their total decision-making process just based on like, oh my, Aaron Gordon scored 30 points. Let's trade 4 first-round picks for him. It's like, oh my God, like Aaron Gordon didn't play well. Like I don't want anything to do with him. Teams aren't going to weigh this game that heavily. So that's the other thing too. The showcasing thing is kind of nonsense. Like we've seen teams do all different kinds of things also, right? Like Andre Drummond not playing for the Cavaliers. Blake Griffin didn't play for the Pistons until they ended up cutting him. So like the showcasing thing goes both ways. Like, are they going to keep him healthy? Are they going to play him? Like I said, there's going to be narratives and it's going to be decided after the game ends, not before it starts. So it's something that I don't think we could weigh all that heavily.
Yeah, totally with you.
And by the way, I am slightly overweight to the field on Aaron Gordon as I'm looking through my exposures right now. So Aaron Gordon is a play I like, and I think he gets a usage bump with no Terrence Ross out there. And also Aaron Gordon, at least the last couple of games we saw no real minutes restriction. And the other thing also with Aaron Gordon that just to add another monkey wrench into this, he is such a high variance player. Like you just look at his last 3 games, 34 DraftKings points, 53, 27. Like Aaron Gordon, when he's at a relatively cheap price, he's always a boom or bust GPP play that I want to get into my lineup. So other forward plays, we're looking at guys in about the same price range as Aaron Gordon. What do you make of Kyle Kuzma, a guy who has been priced up quite a bit now that LeBron James and Anthony Davis both are going to be out for an extended period of time? Kyle Kuzma started last game, played 36 minutes, 22% usage rate, ended up scoring 32 DraftKings points. I'm not quite able to get to the exposure the field has on him. And one of the big reasons actually because I like Aaron Gordon in a somewhat similar price range and I'm getting to more Gordon. What did you do with Kuzma on the slate?
So it looks like he's coming up a decent amount of the time, like 22% across the 1,000 lineups that I ran in Cruncher. Let's take a look at where I get him. This is on FanDuel again.
Yeah, so and it's where I get him. While you bring that up, I'll just add up. He's a little different on FanDuel than DraftKings just because he's a small forward on FanDuel. Yeah. And so that's different also where it's not a 1v1 comparison to Kyle Kuzma like it is on DK.
Yeah, and at that small forward spot on FanDuel, it's just kind of flat today. We're really looking to extract some value from the mid-range, I think, based on the exposures that at least that I'm getting and what's coming up with Alex's projections. I'm getting to some more RJ Barrett, some Evan Fournier, some Kyle Kuzma, some Michael Porter Jr., some of these guys that we'll talk about, but like less Jimmy Butler, not really getting to the most expensive plays there. So yes, Neil, who just DM'd me in Slack, this is Terry McBride, but I'm going to show it now. I'll catch up with you later.
was that so
many messages from people looking for assistance based on the things that I say on these shows. Everybody out there can always feel free to DM me in Slack with your questions. I've created a new little DFS 101 getting started channel in Slack. So hit me up anytime. But when I'm on a show, I'm not going to be able to answer your questions by typing.
Yeah, a lot of questions about Lonzo, whether he's in or out. Still questionable. James Harden also still questionable. But as we said, I expect him to play. I think this is a question that either it's one person who's asked the question a bunch of times or it's a few different people who are asking the question. But Kyle Kuzma versus Michael Porter Jr. So what do you make of MPJ as a play today? And which one of those two do you prefer?
I prefer MPJ. I think he's just in a vacuum the better player. So I don't love getting to Kyle Kuzma just in general. The opportunities there, sure, 0.88 fantasy points per minute rate, up a little bit from 0.85 from last year. But I just think MPJ is the better player. It's not a change of opportunity, but I would, since they're coming up about evenly for me, I would prefer getting to MPJ. Kuzma also getting a little bit too much ownership on the FanDuel side of things. He's -10 leverage score over there. So -5 on DK, more playable on DK, I think. But on FanDuel, I'm kind of wanting to get off the Kuzma play. And I mentioned in my crunch, he was like 22%. After the sorting process, he's like 12.5%, which is about half the field. So that's about where I'd like to be. It's about even with his optimal lineup rate. So I'd undercut the field on Kuzma, and I would probably look to get to more of MPJ.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, they're the same price on FanDuel, and then DraftKings, they are only $100 separating them. Kyle Kuzma, $100 more expensive. I have MPJ projected better on both sites. I have slightly more exposure to him on both sites. So I think that Michael Porter Jr. is the better play of those two. We do have a super chat here from Jeremy Savage. He's asking for Will Barton exposure from us. So Will Barton, who has had some pretty interesting usage over the last handful of games. Barton, 23.6% usage last game, then had a game where he was down a little bit at 18%. But then other than that, he's been pretty comfortably over 20%. And this led to higher fantasy outputs as well. They've also had a handful of high-paced games that have also helped him get to higher fantasy totals. But Will Barton, to me, is a little bit too expensive. I don't have no Will Barton, but I'm under the field. I only have single-digit exposure to Barton. What did you do with him?
I am looking for him right now. I assume I'm going to come up under the field on him as well. Let's see where he was in crunches. Yeah, I'm seeing a few shares of him as I scroll through lineups, but he's not coming up with any significant. 11 lineups out of 1,000, so 1% Will Barton. not a very relevant play for me.
Yeah, and that's how I feel. Also, I'm not quite as low as you. Not 3 out of 1,000, but I mean I think it was 8% was my ownership. I just switched positions here, but it was single digits. So Will Barton, not somebody I think is an outright fade, but not an important piece of my lineups either.
Do you cap the upper end when you crunch? Do you cap the top end of ownership exposures, or could you let somebody in a crunch go to 100?
Yeah. I don't get to 100 all that often, except I don't have an issue. That I actually think the last 2 times I was 100% on somebody was Karis LeVert. It was Karis LeVert, a game with the Nets where they played and Harden and Kyrie were out before the James Harden trade. And then Karis LeVert the other day when he was like 4,200 with no minutes restriction. And all right, we've got a super chat here from Miami Mike. Thoughts on Udonis Haslem? In general, I think that he should be an assistant coach at this point in his career, and I don't understand why he's still on the Heat roster. Those are my. I assume that's just kind of a troll question. But yeah, those are my
news that I didn't see.
Yeah, those are my thoughts on Udonis. I was like confused when I saw the super chat first. Like, did I read that correctly? But yeah, I mean, at this point, I kind of feel like he's just an assistant coach for the Heat who they like to leave on the bench. And then, he'll play 8 minutes in the last game of the season and score like 4 fantasy points. And those are my all-encompassing thoughts on Hassan Whiteside. Thank you, Miami Mike, for the super chat. I'm going to check really quick the premium Slack chat to see if we have any questions here. From Iron Maiden 2, this is a forward question too that I think is relevant. Thoughts on Paul Millsap on DK? I'm a little worried about his playing time there. So Paul Millsap is somebody I have in my player pool, and kind of in the same vein of how I talked about guys like Tyler Johnson, where Paul Millsap is somebody who I don't have projected like ridiculously well. I have him scoring like 20.5 DraftKings points, but at 3,900 on a slate where there's a whole bunch of studs I want to get to, that makes him viable. And I don't think he's likely to play a ton of minutes, but he played 30 minutes last game and fouled out. So he could have potentially played even more than that had it not been for the foul situation. So just somebody being that cheap on a slate with a whole bunch of studs, I think that is somebody I want to get to in Paul Millsap. I'm overweight to the field on him just because, at least in part, because he played those 30 minutes last game. So What do you expect from a playing time perspective for Paul Millsap?
Something in that 24 to 26 range seems fine and appropriate. And if he goes north of that, I think he just increases his utility, his upside, and his value on the slate. I think if he's right around that mark, that's perfect. That's all we need from him at 3,900. Much less in play at 44 on FanDuel. Not off the board, coming up 7% of the optimals, but it's definitely a DK play. And it's all about that utility. You know, it's not a huge upside scoring play, but it's about what he lets you unlock at those other positions. He slots into the power forward and the center spot, so you can move him around the board in a few different ways. And just let you get to those other guys and to all those star players. So yeah, he's very important to the slate on DK at 3,900.
All right, and I mean, whoa, we're just getting flooded with the super chats here. Lots of questions relevant to the slate here. Call Me Touch CMT, thank you for the super chat. He said thoughts on Kosta Koufos. I don't know. I think he would have had a better NBA career if you used Propecia. Like, I just don't understand. I don't understand you just play in the NBA with that hairstyle. Like, if I don't know if Jordan's savvy enough to pull a picture real quick, but I mean, he was just ridiculous looking. But also, Kosta Koufos sneakily had some good DFS games back in the day where he would just start at center for the Kings when they had who's the coach before Luke Walton? I don't know, but like he would just like they had young players to play and they would just insist on being like, no, we're going to play Kosta Koufos 30 minutes tonight. And he would just have some like good fantasy games. So yeah, I've won some money rostering Kosta Koufos, friend of the program. And then Adine, another one here. This is becoming a running bit here where people just want to know about irrelevant big men. Thoughts on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, one of the best big men of all time. Probably the best college player of all time, him alongside Bill Walton, I would say. I mean, I'm no college basketball connoisseur, but yeah, I would say that that's probably his claim to fame, best college basketball player of all time. Now people are
as good an actor as he is a basketball player.
What was the Airplane movie?
Airplane.
Oh, okay, yeah, I don't know how I didn't pull that name, but. Yeah, all right. I was not prepared for some of these questions today, but all right, here we've actually got a question that's relevant to the DFS slate. Soul Dope 1234. What's cooking, fellas? Thoughts on Randle and Wiseman on FanDuel? Also, the top 3 centers on FanDuel. Thanks for all the help. Let's start with Julius Randle, a piece that I think is very relevant to both FanDuel and DraftKings. Now that Derrick Rose is confirmed out, that bumps up the usage rate for me for Julius Randle by a pretty good amount. And even though we've seen Derrick Rose be out for a little while, the reason it was relevant to me is I thought Derrick Rose was going to play today. And then once Derrick Rose was ruled out, I was like, oh, that's a little surprising. Now I'm going to like Julius Randle a whole ton. So Randle, one of my higher owned players on both FanDuel and DraftKings. How do you feel about Randle? Is it similar thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I'm getting to pretty significant shares of Randle. I was getting them less earlier on, and it definitely bumped up with the Rose news. He's already projected for, I had him at like 37 minutes. It looks like Alex has him at 38 and change. He could easily go over 40 minutes. He's going to do most of the facilitation for this team. So the assist rate goes up in Rose's absence. The usage goes up. He's going to be able to do basically whatever he wants. They're in a pace-up game against the Wizards. So it's just all positive markers across the board for the Randle play. Already a player who's playing spectacularly well all season long. We're living in a $10,000 Julius Randle world, and I'm going to be a part of it, which is not something I would have thought I would have been on before the season.
All right. And then he also asked here thoughts on James Wiseman on FanDuel. As a GPP play, I think that he's a viable punt just because of the price point. James Wiseman, off the top of my head, yeah, he's 4,500 on FanDuel. Or no, 4,500 on DraftKings. He was cheaper than on.
Yeah, it's 39 on FanDuel.
Yeah, 39 on FanDuel. So just because of his ability to rack up defensive stats, and there's been games with the Warriors that have not been competitive. And James Wiseman just ends up playing, like 20 minutes in garbage time, a lot of it being against backups, and then just does really well from points per minute perspective. I think we saw in like the Warriors' second game of the season where he just broke GPPs by doing that. So Wiseman at 3,700, I think that he's an upside punt play, especially because the Warriors, I expect them to struggle in games without Steph Curry. So I think there's always a chance to get blown out, and potentially getting garbage time from Wiseman is definitely something that intrigues me. So 3,700 for Wiseman on FanDuel in play for me. I'm overweight to the field. Don't like him as much on DraftKings. James Wiseman, also coming back from COVID. Any feels on that situation?
On the COVID situation, I hope he's feeling well and and all of that. But yeah, I'll have some pretty decent shares of Wiseman. He's in play for me based mostly on the price. Which is weird because normally center's not a spot I love to pay down at on FanDuel, where we get a lot of opportunity cost on normal slates. But today, we really don't have tremendous pay-up options. We've got Jokic and Vukovic. But outside of those two, there's a big swath of the mid-range, and everybody's coming up, across the prices and across those tiers of talent. Everybody's coming up in the optimal relatively the same amount. So give me a super discounted guy who's coming up only a couple percentage points off the most expensive guy's rate. Let me get to him, and that pays for my ability to get to Harden, Simmons, and Lillard all in the same lineups in a lot of cases, and while still filling out some of that mid-range with some decent plays instead of grabbing punt plays at every spot. So I like the Wiseman play today.
Yeah, and then the last part of the question was he wanted to know who are our favorite overall center plays on FanDuel, and relative to ownership, James Wiseman is one of them for me. I also like Nikola Jokic, who is expensive, but I don't think that's a massive issue on this slate just because there's so much value available to us. And then Enes Kanter priced all the way down to 5,900 in a plus matchup against the Nets. Those are my favorite center plays. Is there anything there that you strongly disagree with?
No, I'm with you on all three of those. I like what Kanter looks like in that spot. Definitely the price has come down, and there's nobody to really fear in that for him in that Brooklyn front court. So I think he's going to have a nice game there. The other guy that does look a little bit changed, his optimal lineup rate came down a decent amount, but not a huge amount. It's at 9% now. It was at like 13 earlier in the day. But his ownership is just non-existent, is Nikola Vukovic, who is at, a superstar caliber player. We've talked about some of those concerns with Gordon. So if you are concerned that Aaron Gordon's going to be limited, not play, et cetera, maybe you go to the Vooch play at essentially no ownership, strong leverage, not extremely optimal. But again, the center spot is relatively flat today. The top option, Dwight Howard at 14.3% of the simulated lineups coming up optimal. So, Vooch at 9%, I'm fine with going to that when the public is way behind the field on that. So I might give him a little bit of a bump here.
All right, one more super chat here from A. Dean. Dead serious this time because I'm still considering this for tonight's slate. Hashim Thabit or Luke Harangody. I would say if I had to project either of them as better fantasy producers, it would probably be Hashim Thabit at 7'6" and the ability to block shots. So go with Thabit in that sort of situation. Guys, if you haven't already done it, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget also, today's show is sponsored by No House Advantage. No House Advantage taking a little bit of a different approach to DFS. Instead of just the standard way that we're building lineups with salary and all that, instead, we're building lineups based on props, and we're building lineup cards where we're putting a confidence interval on those props. So let's say you really like James Harden, you like the over on his points, rebounds, and assists, then you could take that No House Advantage. You could put that as your 10-point prop. If it hits, you get 10 points for that. You pick out 10 props on a scale of 1 to 10. The one you feel most confident you're in 10. And now, Terry, how many? I'm just gonna throw out, how many props do you think they have to choose from on No House Advantage? 10, 20? How many do you think they got out there?
I would have to think it's got to be under 100. It couldn't possibly be even 100, right?
500. So
500.
It used to be not as much, but now that I've extended, now there's 500 props to choose from. So anything you want, any players, rebounds, points, assists, all different kinds of props to build your lineups with on No House Advantage. Download the No House Advantage app today. Use the promo code Awesemo to receive $20 free match play deposit for all users. Then tonight there is a 10K contest, $5,000 to first place. Beat your friends, not the house. Win big with player props today. And then also don't forget that Terry and I were going to be talking about No House Advantage from 7 o'clock to 7:30. And stick around. We still have James Harden's questionable, Lonzo Ball's questionable. So all those kinds of injuries we're probably going to have to talk about as they get ruled out and other injury news occurs. And then also subscribe to the YouTube channel because we do have the late slate live before lock that I'll be doing with, I believe, Spags later in the day. So stick around for all that. Centers, I feel like we've hit them pretty well there. I know we went a little out of order, but it was dressed in that super chat. Any other centers you want to mention here?
No, I think we touched on them all in that last question. Jokic up top is always an option. You're paying for a star caliber player. You know what you're getting with him. No significant dings, no significant, changes that would give him a big boost or anything like that. He's Nikola Jokic. He's absolutely fine. If you've got 11 to spend on FanDuel, great. If you got 10-7 on DK, go for it. He's getting owned appropriately, so no major advantage, but forklifting him into your lineup is never really a mistake. But I do think there's a lot of value plays to look to at the center spot today.
All right, so let's circle back to the power forwards. We talked about the small forwards, ended up going a little out of order to address the questions there. It just seemed like a good point to talk about the small forwards. But I mean, the centers, the power forward position now, I think we're both on the same page. Julius Randle, really high priority play, especially with Derrick Rose out. Already was somebody I was going to want to get to, but also really favorable matchup against the Wizards and all the usage in the world going to him without Rose. One thing that I think is maybe a little interesting to bring up, do you think it dings him at all that Mitchell Robinson is back and healthy?
I think he does. They do different things on the court too enough. Like Randall's not going to be under the rim blocking shots, which is, kind of Mitch's specialty. Maybe a little bit in the rebounding department, but I think Randall's going to pick up enough of an uptick in the assist side of things and the facilitation with the mess at point guard and, nobody really able to facilitate, that I think it probably balances it out at worst. And we still don't really know what Mitch is going to play. Like Mitch, what did he get? Like 17 minutes the other night, 16, 17 minutes. If he goes north of 20, I'd probably be surprised. I think they're going to handle him with kid gloves coming back. And Randall's been playing alongside guys who played a somewhat similar game in Nerlens Noel and Taj Gibson, where they're focused on just pulling down some rebounds and protecting the rim to some degree. That I don't think it's much of a different look if it's Mitch or if it's Nerlens Noel out there. So I think the Randall plays fine either way.
Yeah, I think some people are concerned that he might lose out on some of the center minutes. Over the last 4 games, though, he played 46 minutes last game against Sixers. There was a game that went to overtime, but still, he was going to play over 40 minutes without the overtime. Then the 3 games prior to that, he played 40, 41, 41 minutes. The game before that, he only played 39. So, the minutes have been just ridiculously high for Julius Randle. It's not a real concern for me. Confidently fire up Julius Randle, cash games and GPPs, in my opinion.
Tim will find a way to get Julius Randle on the court regardless of what else is going on. I promise you.
Yeah, he's been not quite as consistent with playing his starters, ridiculous minutes this year, but Julius Randle is still getting those minutes no matter what. He's the engine that drives the Knicks. Another super chat here from Kyle Frank. We have a 2v2 question on FanDuel. Josh Hart and Jimmy Butler or Brandon Ingram and Michael Porter Jr. What say you, T. McBee?
Sorry, missed that. Brandon Ingram or Michael Porter Jr. was that one?
It was Josh Hart and Jimmy Butler or Brandon Ingram and Michael Porter Jr. It is Ingram, Michael Porter Jr. for me.
Yeah, same here. I wasn't getting to much of either of the other 2 players. Butler not coming up very much all for me. And we talked about it earlier. I think there's just a small forward on FanDuel in particular is a spot where we just want to kind of get to some of those mid-range guys and not worry so much. There's pay-up options at all the other spots. Jimmy doesn't really stand out. So, I would be on that other one. All
right. Still a lot of questions about Lonzo Ball, a lot of questions about James Harden. Both of them are questionable. Guys, don't go into the YouTube chat and just throw out bad information because I'm gonna time something out. Like it's not like just there's no big advantage to be gained by going into the YouTube chat and just being like, oh, player X is out for the night. Like you're not influencing any people. You're just trying to deceive maybe 1 or 2 people to read your comment. Not worth it. So,
and it's not even funny. Like if you were doing something fun with like humor upside that was, funny to make a bunch of us laugh, then sure, but that's not even a good troll. Like it's just dumb.
Yeah. Harden's still questionable. I expect he's going to end up playing today, but not official, just an educated guess on my part. Who's one big man that we did not talk about is Nick Claxton. And somewhat popular as a value play. He's another guy I just throw in the barrel of value plays from that. Like I don't have a real strong stance on Nick Claxton. He's a really good points per minute fantasy producer. I do worry a little bit now that we have Blake Griffin in the mix that there's going to be a point. I think that Blake Griffin's going to play slightly more significant minutes for the Nets. I don't think he's going to be a guy who all of a sudden, starts and plays 30 minutes or anything like that. But I do think there's going to be an effort by the Nets to get some minutes to Blake Griffin. And if he's going to play some more minutes than he played last game, I think Nick Claxton is one of the guys who's a sacrifice of that. So I have Claxton in my player pool, but I don't have some sort of crazy amount of exposure to him. Just a guy who I have double-digit exposure to. Do you have any strong Nick Claxton takes?
He's in the mix for me. Looks like he came out in the wash in like the 6 to 8% range, depending on what I do with this final upload. But not an extreme play for me. He's got plenty of fine value, and like you said, does produce 1.23 fantasy points per minute player this year. I just think there are other options, and with the minutes somewhat in question, we don't have like a huge minutes projection where if he's at 22.8 as of the last update that Alex had. If he was somewhere more in that 28 range for that price, I think he'd be much more interesting. He's not a bad play. He's just kind of fine.
Yeah, I mean I'm neutral on him. I have about even exposure to him with him to the field. I know a lot of people are asking a lot of questions about him just because I mean, it's obvious to see what the substantial upside is. I just don't know if the minutes are going to be there or not. And I think he has the potential to break the slate. I think he has the potential to just put up a total stinker. So what I do is I just kind of looked at his exposure to the field. I was like, this isn't where I'm going to make my stand. My night is not going to be made or break by Nicholas Claxton. So just like, all right, this is what the field's doing with him. That's what I'll do as well. And that's what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point that you make there. You know, you can do that with some of these guys that, yeah, they're popping up a ton. They look like very good value plays, but when they're in that like mid-range 4,600 on FanDuel, 39's a little bit better value on DK, but he's very popular. But you can start looking, that's an easier score to replace by making a pivot than from an 11,000 Harden making a pivot down to somebody who's, you know, projected for 12 fewer points, comes up way less optimal. So consider what the range of outcomes for your pivots are. And I think there are just more available pivots at that at the price range that we're getting Claxton at than at some of these other guys. So yeah, that's a really good point by you.
All right, well, here we go. Now we've got the news that is official. Lonzo Ball will not play tonight. He's out due to his hip injury. So here we go. We've got news breaking 7 minutes before the slate locks. Pretty significant here. So let's break this down right now. What is going to change for you significantly now that Lonzo Ball is not in?
So, I think it gives a little bit of a boost to Josh Hart. I think it gives probably a boost to Eric Bledsoe, who I don't really want to get to anyway. And then probably the most important guy for our purposes is going to be Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who should see a bump in minutes, should definitely be getting up a ton of threes. If he's making them, he's going to be a big value on the slate. 4,900 at a relatively, well, not relatively flat, a relatively interesting shooting guard spot where there's a big peak on a couple guys and then it's very flat. So we've got a monster peak and then a plateau. I think he becomes a little bump in that now with what we expect, with where I expect his projection to go. So he becomes very interesting. 0.97 fantasy point per minute producer for the year. We've seen him hit some upside games. That becomes an interesting play. You get him at point guard and shooting guard on DK for less money too.
Yeah, and Nickeil Walker-Alexander, he started and played over 30 minutes last game. We've seen him make a handful of starts this year. Some mixed results, but one thing we've seen from NAW when he gets on the court, he's not afraid to shoot. We saw the first start that he made this year was a game against the Clippers. He played 33 minutes, had a 34% usage rate, scored 52.5 DraftKings points. He doesn't care if he's missing shots. He's going out there. He's going to shoot them. 22% usage rate last game. Overall, as a starter for the season, he has made 4 starts, playing 30 minutes per game, scoring 32 DraftKings points in those starts. I'm going to be updating my lineups as quickly as I can to be getting some Nickeil Alexander-Walker because I definitely think that he's a key play. Really funny, just going to address that Kyle Frank just said to us, wow, so my super chat didn't matter. Yeah, sorry, that does happen from time to time where you ask a question and then just seconds later, all of a sudden, everything changes. Also, thanks to SoulDope1234, who another super chat was just thanking us for answering all the questions we've gotten today. Is there anybody else that's going to change for you, like Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram? Are you getting to either of these guys at a higher rate now that we don't have Lonzo Ball in the lineup?
Honestly, I'm going to hopefully let some of that trickle into our post-lock swap since we've got a little bit of time to play with that one. I think we've seen Lonzo, we've seen Zion facilitating a little bit more as part of his repertoire in recent games. So maybe he gets a minor uptick in the assist rate there, but it's not something I would really, look to push him into too many more of my lineups. Ingram, similar kind of a story. So I think they were both just, kind of appropriately priced. I'll take them where I get them, unless they really, spring up in value in Alex's numbers where I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be getting to Eric Bledsoe now. I think there's such a strong bias against Eric Bledsoe. And by the way, he's been massively disappointing this year. He was a guy who was a really good player in the past. I thought one of the better defensive players in the league at the guard position. Also somebody who had been a good fantasy producer and somebody I thought played at a borderline all-star level and has fallen off in such a big way with New Orleans, but I don't think he's totally washed. I don't think he's quite the same athletic player he was before. But I do think what we're seeing with Eric Bledsoe is, number one, it's not a great fit for him in New Orleans, but a lot of that has to do with him playing alongside Lonzo Ball. And now that Lonzo is out today, I expect bigger things from him. So For sure. I think Eric Bledsoe is somebody I'm going to want to get to, and also somebody who in a lot of these games where I think he should be chalk, I think he goes overlooked just because there's such a strong bias against Eric Bledsoe. Like you brought it up before, you're like, I don't want to get to Eric Bledsoe. You know who else thinks that? Everybody. Nobody likes Eric Bledsoe. Like I'm the only Eric Bledsoe fan on the entire planet. It's definitely something that impacts his ownership. So Eric Bledsoe, somebody that I am right now making a point to get to. Anybody's last second questions, please do fire those in. And don't forget, the show does not end at 7:00. We are going to be going until after lock. T McBee and I, 30 minutes. We're going to be talking about the no house advantage slate, talking about some of the props there, some of the plays that stick out to us the most. So stick around for that as well. 2 minutes until lock. Terry, is there anything about this slate that really stands out to you that we've not had a chance to talk on yet?
Let's see that we've covered a lot of ground on this one. Some of my Knicks, like I mentioned RJ Barrett, I mentioned the small forward being a mid-range kind of a position on FanDuel today. I think he's somewhat interesting. He was popping up a little bit for me. Reasonable projection from Alex. We've seen his minutes bounce around a little bit. He was getting more minutes earlier in the season. They came down a little. He's a kid who needs minutes to produce, not the most efficient player, but we've seen minor upticks in his three-point shooting and some of the other things he does on the floor. Priced back to 6,200. I think he's somewhat relevant. He's also coming up fairly evenly owned with his optimal rate, though, on FanDuel in particular. What were you getting? Were you getting to any shares of RJ Barrett in your mix of small forward? Or what does your small forward position look like?
I'm looking now. I think something that actually didn't back that much. I thought maybe with Nickeil Alexander-Walker becoming viable for me that it would lower the ownership. As I'm updating my lineups now, I'm just kind of looking over my exposure, see what changed significantly, if anything, with the not the NAW news. I consider it the NAW news just because he's the player that ended up coming into my lineups the most. So Nickeil Alexander-Walker is in a really heavy chunk of my lineups now. Who did that bring down? Oh, you know who actually that impacted the most on DraftKings was Jordan Poole. Because Jordan Poole, who is somebody who I've projected really similarly to Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but just Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a lot cheaper. It looks like Jordan Poole was one of the biggest sacrifices of that because I'm now underweight to the field on Jordan Poole, and I was slightly overweight before that. Other guys, let me compare my crunches. By the way, we are now at lock, so we'll be talking about no advantage in a second. I'm just trying to figure this out. Who else was impacted? It looks like it was Jordan Poole was the biggest one. What do you think is going to change your lineups the most with the Lonzo Ball news?
I'm actually looking at the 4,900. It looks like in this most recent update that I did that I didn't get to as much additional NAW as I thought I would. So that's interesting. It looks like the Bruce Brown and the James Harden in particular just continued to eat up all that shooting guard ownership. So I'm going to have a lot of them together, and then I'm going to spread a little bit, but not nearly as much as I thought, to Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So that's an interesting spot. That's going to be a major issue for me if Harden doesn't go. I'm going to have a lot of changes to make and a lot of pivoting to do, but that's where we're at going into lock or blowing past lock at this point.
All right, one final super chat to get to once again from SoulDope1234. Last question for the night, and he promises I'm not going to hold you through that. If you really want to make a super chat and ask us some more questions, we'll get to it anyway. For FanDuel, Ingram and Aaron Gordon or Randle and Derrick Jones Jr. Well, that's tough for me because I really like Julius Randle a lot for this slate, but I don't really like Derrick Jones Jr. all that much. So just for that, I'm going to go towards Brandon Ingram and Aaron Gordon. What do you say about that, T McBee? That is Brandon Ingram and Aaron Gordon or Julius Randle and Derrick Jones Jr.
Yeah, I'm with you that Randle was my favorite out of all four players, but I was getting to a good amount of Aaron Gordon as well. So I would go that route because I saw Ingram a decent amount of times, and I don't know that I saw any Derrick Jones come up in my lineups. So that would definitely be the route I would go as well.
All right, I'm going to pull up the no house advantage projections now because the main slate, that is locked, but it's not locked. The no house advantage slate because they're going to have a contest locking at 7:30. And once again, if you guys are not familiar with no house advantage, this isn't a typical DFS site. We're not building lineups based on salary or anything like that. We're building lineups based on player props. So, player props have become one of the most popular forms of sports betting. This is just a different way of combining player props and DFS, where we're going to be building DFS style lineups around player props. And so, like we said before, No house advantage over 500 player props choose from. And I mean, 500, what a ridiculous. Now, like who could even count that high, right? So, I mean, the other thing that's also really good about 500, right? You don't have to worry about overlap with anybody else's lineups. There's enough options to choose from in terms of props where you could build a lineup that's going to be totally unique from everybody else who's building lineups. So 500 player props we have to choose from No House Advantage. We're going to dig through some of those and try to figure out some of the ones that we like the most to build lineups with. And then also, guys, don't forget, download the No House Advantage app today. Use the promo code Awesemo to receive a $20 free match play bonus. And then also, if you're not sure of which players, like you're like, oh my God, there's all these props to choose from, 500. You just go to awesemo.com. We have free projections up on the site for No House Advantage that will highlight some of the best props to choose on the slate based on what Alex's projections are. So go and do that. And also, there's a really big prize pool tonight on No House Advantage. Overall, $10,000 prize pool, $5,000 to first place. So let's dig into some of these props right here, Terry. Do you have the projections up in front of you right now?
I do. I have the projections and the optimal lineups page as well, which is also pretty cool. Just laid out in front of you, just lineups to choose from. So we make this one really pretty straightforward and easy to get to some of the best plays for No House Advantage. So yeah, fire away.
By the way, oh my God, we've got news. We've got news happening. Like I said, I said don't go away because there could be news that's going to affect the main slate. We'll talk about the No House Advantage props in a second. Starting lineup for the Lakers. What do you make of this? Dennis Schroeder. All right, no issue there. KCP, normal, right? We expected that. Kyle Kuzma. Yeah, we knew he was going to be in there. Markieff Morris. Yep. Starting at center, Devontae Kakak. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right.
Even if you're not, it seems appropriate. Jeez, that's an interesting one. I don't know how much Montrezl Harrell I was getting to, but I'm going to take him out of my lineups now, I guess. He is their leader in usage in situations without AD and LeBron on the court all year long. It's going to be interesting to see what goes on. I guess we're going to distribute all of that usage across a bunch of those guys in the starting lineup. THT is still somewhat relevant to me, but yeah, hopefully I'm just hoping I don't have a ton of Montrezl Harrell in here to get rid of.
All right, so here's what I think is reasonable to expect from him. Like, this is a different starting lineup we've seen from the Lakers, but don't forget also they were starting who were they starting? They were starting Jones at center before. He was on a 10-day contract, and then it ran up. They did not end up picking up his contract again. So I don't think we should expect something different from Kakak that we saw from Jones. And I'm just going to bring up really quick because I don't have his numbers in front of me since he isn't on the team anymore, which also makes it a little hard. But also, I'm going to bring up, like, when he's been on the court, this is not somebody I considered at all for this slate. There was never a point in time where I was building lineups. I was like, oh, how about this random center from the Lakers who's barely played any minutes this year? Won't he be relevant? I assume he's been priced on both sites. I didn't think to look at his price tag at any point. I can't imagine he's anything different than mid-price. So he has played in 7 games this year. In those 7 games, he's averaging 4.3 minutes and 4.7 DraftKings points. So there is nothing that we could take away from there in terms of what his expected points per minute production is. I think it's just fair to assume that most replacement level big men are going to produce fantasy points at around a fantasy point per minute. His season high in minutes, throw out a guess. What do you think is the most minutes he's played in a game this year?
10.
It is 7. So you shorted him. I mean, you were long on him a little bit there. So yeah, the most minutes he's played in a game this year, 7 minutes against the Golden State Warriors on February 28th. And he ended up scoring 8 fantasy points in that game. So,
breaker.
Are you going to get to him at all?
I don't think so. Min price on both sites. I think we've got better options regardless. It doesn't seem like a guy that is going to leap to production all of a sudden. If I'm wrong on a guy like Kakak, then I'll be wrong. I'll go down with that ship. That's man, I was treading some shaky ground there with that combination of words. Yeah, I do not want any part of this one.
All right, so here's something I think could be relevant to the slate. How much does this impact Montrezl Harrell for you? I'm going to give Montrezl Harrell, I didn't even think like Kakak was somebody who was going to play significant minutes at all. Now, I mean, at least that he's starting now, like he has to play somewhere in the neighborhood of like 12 to 15 minutes. I think that has to take away from Montrezl Harrell a little bit, just because I didn't even think this guy was going to be in the rotation before. So I had Montrezl Harrell for 33 minutes. I'm going to give him 31 now. That's going to lower my exposure to him a little bit. Does it do anything for you?
Yeah, it looks like that's about where Alex has him lowered down to in the most recent update as well. And I think it probably thrusts him into that area where he's a little bit over-owned on both sites now. It comes down just enough in production in his optimal lineup rate, unless we get a change in ownership based on this, which people might jump off the play now. I think that we can safely consider at least undercutting the field and maybe getting away from some of those Harrell shares for sure. I think there's just enough of a question mark on what the overall upside in minutes looks like. He's, like I said before, he's been leading the team in usage in this situation, but just shaving a few minutes off, especially where he's 7,500 on FanDuel, it takes enough relevance away. 6,800, you might get away with it a little bit better on DK, but that's, it's a little bit of a discount in proportion to the overall cap, but not that much. So it's a tricky spot.
All right, so I'm going to look at right now some of the no house advantage props. Let's talk about some of our favorite ones, and then we could circle back on the Lakers center situation, so we don't get too far. The YouTube chat going crazy right now. This is the greatest name they've ever seen in their entire lives. I like how we all have just like-minded people at a YouTube chat at the same time, because all of the same third grade level jokes we're all thinking them at the same time, because we're all children who just play fantasy sports. So here's some of the props that stand out the most. A player who Alex has projected to be the best unders, basically all of the Blake Griffin props. If you look at the numbers on Blake Griffin, his pricing here, and here's where there's a little bit of similarities between no house advantage and just regular DFS, DraftKings, FanDuel. If you see a player who's changed situations, it's going to be the same thing where the props don't change during the day. It's just that the props are basically the same as the salary. So if somebody is in a spot where all of a sudden, like James Harden, Kyrie Irving's ruled out, then we could expect more usage to go to Harden. It's probably favorable to look at the overs on his props. We have something here with Blake Griffin, who's basically priced like his time when he was with Detroit. So Blake Griffin, over under 21.5 points, rebounds, assists, over under 16.5 points, assists, over under 13.5. These are all numbers that we have with over a 90% chance to hit the under here. Do you think that is too high, or what do you expect from Blake Griffin now in his second game with the Nets?
I definitely don't expect the production that the line expects. That's for sure. I would be confidently under on all of those things. I don't think they've come near adjusting for the current version of Blake Griffin that we have just across this year in general, and definitely not for the guy who's been sitting out for like a month and change and just joined this team and has barely worked into the rotation. Not going to see enough minutes, I don't think, to hit these marks. Confidently under, right with the boss on those marks.
And then going forward, what are you expecting from Blake Griffin with the Nets? I mean, the one thing that everybody's talking about from his first Nets game, he dunked. It was his first dunk since 2019. It wasn't like it was some majorly impressive feat of athleticism, though. Basically, he got the ball, the lane opened up like he was Moses. He slowly walked down the middle of the paint and then like barely had a two-handed jam. Like it wasn't like this was him jumping over a key or something like that, circa whatever year that was, 2014 or whatever. So, I think he could give them something in terms of value. He actually played like reasonably good defense in that game, but I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant unless there's some massive injury situation with the Nets going forward. So, Blake Griffin, go ahead.
Unless something weird happens, I'm with you. I don't think he's going to be a major DFS play. If we see him drop into like ridiculous salary ranges and he's getting 24-ish minutes a night in a couple of weeks, maybe he works in as a value play here and there on the right slate, just given the open nature of how that team plays and everything. But I think he's more there for his defense and for 20-ish minutes a night going down the stretch and into the playoffs. I don't think he's going to be overly DFS relevant for us. And you meant the Moses, not Moses Malone, when you were describing that, dunk?
I meant Moses Brown from the Thunder. Let's see some of the other no house advantage props. Blake Griffin, to me, those are the obvious ones. I think any lineup you throw in Blake Griffin, I think you want to have any of those three pops: points, rebounds, assists, or points. All three of those, I think those are the three strongest plays on the slate. The under for those, that's where I want to go with my 10-point play. The one that I have the most confidence in. That's what Alex's projections bear out. I agree with them. I don't think Blake Griffin's going to play a massive amount of minutes. The other thing too, there's a whole bunch of guys in that front court that are still going to get minutes, right? Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Nick Claxton, Jeff Green. So it's hard to see the route to Blake Griffin playing, like 25 minutes or anything like that. Other players that Alex likes the under to here, the props on Kendrick Nunn. So how do you feel about him? And did you get any exposure to Kendrick Nunn as a DFS play on this slate?
I don't think I did. If I did, it was not that much. I didn't see him. It looks like 0.67% of my 150 lineups have Kendrick Nunn. So what's that, one? So it looks like I rolled out one share of them. Did not get to very much of them at all, just based on how much of the point guard shares were going to only a couple of the star level guys that we talked about. And then how much I was getting to MCW as a value play. Just got soaked up and squeezed out from there. But yeah, with Dragic out, it's reasonable to expect that he's going to have a good game. But do we think that he's going to hit most of these numbers? It looks like Alex isn't there. And I don't know that I'm going to be there either. Pretty strongly against, the 24.5 points and rebounds and assists. Alex has him projected for 18 and change. I think that's probably pretty reasonable.
And do you have the projections in front of you? I always get skittish to open up too many tabs on my computer because sometimes the internet craps out and then Jordan gets mad at me. And, Jordan, like I spend so much time with Jordan, I can't have Jordan mad at me. So I'm wondering how many minutes did Alex give Kakak? That's been a very popular question in the YouTube chat and definitely something that is relevant to the slate as opposed to most of the other comments we're getting about him in the YouTube chat.
Yeah, I don't have the YouTube chat up, but I do have the projections. Looks like we got an update 5 minutes ago, so it's not in my sheet. I'm just waiting for it to load here. I got a bunch of tabs open too, so my loading speed is not what it would be. Here we go. Looks like he got to wrong tab. My bad. I was on the DraftKings tab. 1/2 second here. Looks like he got to a 15.1 minute projection from the boss in the most recent update.
All right. So yeah, where I have him as I give him 14 minutes. But yeah, as a points per dollar play, I mean, like I said, I have him as a 1 point per minute fantasy producer. So 15, like that would make him a really fringe option. And yeah, he's not somebody I'm getting to as of now, unless we get some other news that it's like, hey, the Lakers really want to see what this guy has and they want to give him extended minutes. I mean, we do know the Lakers are a little thin in the front court, so maybe a beat reporter comes out and says that, hey, they want to give him a go to see if he could play a role in the playoffs. Then maybe I'd be a little more bullish on him. But right now, I'm not getting to him in any of my lineups. So. That is where I land with the Lakers center situation. Really what was most impactful is it slightly lowers my exposure to Montrezl Harrell, but not to the point where he's a fade or anything like that. All right, other players here. Elfrid Payton, somebody else who, even though he is active today, Elfrid Payton has not played very much as of late. Payton, let's see, what has his workload been in recent games? Elfrid Payton coming back from a hamstring injury. He was listed as questionable to play. Still a points plus rebounds plus assist prop of 23.5. To me, that's pretty high considering that we're seeing Payton come right back from injury. Payton has only played in 2 games since February 23rd. He briefly came back from a hamstring injury. He got hurt again and then had to sit back on the shelf. So considering what happened the last time he came back from injury and that he got hurt again, like I can't see the Knicks giving him much more than like 22 or 24 minutes. So Elfrid Payton, do you agree with me that this is, and with Alex also, this is one of the stronger underplays on the slate?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that Derrick Rose is out. Normally that's something that maybe it starts us to consider boosting Payton, but given that he's still somewhat of a question mark in terms of how much he's going to be out there, coming back from a strained hamstring, it's not a great injury for a guy who, gets a little bit out of his ability to, slash and kick and do these things, that require some athleticism. I just don't know how much he's going to be out there on the floor. I don't know that he's going to give us enough time or production to hit these marks. So yeah, right with you and the boss on the Elf Payton one as well.
All right, and some people in the Slack chat excited that in the first couple minutes of the game, Aaron Gordon does have 2 points and assists and a block. And as we all know, the only thing that matters in DFS is the first 3 minutes of the first quarter, and nothing else even counts in the contest. Whatever you start your screenshots 3 minutes into the slate, wherever you stand, that's probably where you're going to finish. But yes,
I'm starting to count my money already.
A barely notable start by Aaron Gordon, but better than a bad start at least. So those are definitely some of the stronger unders on the slate. Let's look at some of the over numbers too. Some of the ones that Alex's projections have to go over. Something else I want to mention about no house advantage also, especially because we have some players who are listed as questionable, like we said. if somebody's listed as questionable and end up getting ruled out and they have a prop, don't just go pick the under for them, because if somebody's out of the game, then you get 0 points for them. Even if that player, obviously nobody's hitting the over when they're out of the game, except that doesn't mean the under is a win either. If somebody's injured and out for the game, take them out of your lineups because their props will not count. I just think that's notable, especially with all the injuries that have been going on lately. One of the stronger overplays, and this is also somebody who I said I liked a little bit for DFS, particularly on FanDuel. Enes Kanter has an over/under 10.5 rebound line. Alex has him projected for nearly 13 rebounds. It gives him an 82% chance to hit the over here. Enes Kanter, I know we both talked about him being a pretty strong GPP option on FanDuel, wasn't picking up all that much ownership. Does this lead you to believe maybe even feel better about him being a good GPP play, seeing the rebounds that Alex has projected for him?
Yeah, for sure. He's an excellent rebounder, underrated post player in general. He's got some slick post moves to score the ball, but just does a tremendous amount on the boards. I think there's going to be plenty of shots taken in this game. That's the highest projected game on the entire slate in terms of game total. And you're talking about a guy who pulls down 45.5% of his team's rebounds on the offensive end, 60% of their offensive rebounds. I think it's sitting right there for him, and there's not going to be a ton of guys getting in his way. Going up against DeAndre, he's going to be able to out-rebound and outwork DeAndre down low. If he's going up against Claxton, I think he's just a more experienced NBA player. If we just want to get into what's going to affect his ability to rebound, I don't worry about these guys out-rebounding him. So yeah, I'm right there with you on the Kanter one. I think that's a very good call.
Oh my God, another basket for Aaron Gordon. So yeah, like our friend Seth says. Yeah, Aaron Gordon or log out. It's a losing night for you if you don't have the 4 points and assist from Aaron Gordon so far in the first 2 minutes of the game. But yeah,
GMs all around the league just suddenly, who is this Aaron Gordon guy that the Magic are showcasing all of a sudden?
Yeah, it's the showcase, right? I mean, that's why he's playing well. He made those first 2 shots of the game just because of the showcase.
Can't wait to be a Chicago Bull.
So one other player, getting back to some of the unders here that stands out. Mitchell Robinson projected over under 9.5 points, over under 9.5 rebounds. These are numbers I feel pretty good about the under. Also 16.5 points plus rebounds. Also numbers that Alex has projected for the under here. So Mitchell Robinson coming back from a fractured hand. He had surgery. He actually at first thought he was going to miss the most of the rest of the season, but he came back a little bit sooner than expected. One thing we saw from him last game, number one, he didn't start. Number two, he played less minutes than he was playing prior to the injury. Something that Tom Thibodeau said when he first came back, he said that Mitchell Robinson, he does envision him starting at some point, but at least as of now, he said he likes how the starting lineup looks like with Nerlens Noel there. He likes Taj Gibson getting minutes. So with that said, it's not like Mitchell Robinson is playing alongside any of these guys. And with it being a 3-man center rotation, it's hard for me to give all that many minutes to Mitchell Robinson. Therefore, I like the under on all of his props, the points, the rebounds, obviously then also points plus rebounds. So I'll ask you a couple questions here. Number one, do you feel the same way that I do about Mitchell Robinson? And then if you do, which one of the unders do you feel most confident in?
Yeah, as a Knicks fan, nothing makes you happier than the coach saying that he's going to give Taj Gibson a lot more minutes than the project kid with extreme upside that needs to develop. But I think that's the situation we're in. I do not see him getting enough run to hit these marks, even though they're pretty low. They're probably something that might appeal to some people out there in the general public. But based on Alex's projections, based on mine, based on the fact that 9 points is a lot to ask from Mitch Robinson on a fully healthy full run night sometimes. He's a great efficient scorer, set the league record in field goal percentage last season. But just because he can put the ball in the basket frequently when he tries, doesn't mean he tries all that often, doesn't mean he racks up a ton of points. So based on the points one alone, I think it's definitely on the board. And I think 7.5 rebounds is going to be a lot to ask in the 16 to 20 minutes that we project for him. He could blow through that pretty easily if he's out there for more than that. But I don't know that he's going to have enough time on the court to rack up these numbers. So I'd be on any one of those, the combined one or the individual ones.
All right, so I'm going to throw it to you now and ask, of the players we have not yet talked about, No House Advantage, by the way, everybody go to the Google Play Store, the iTunes Store, whatever other your phone device, whatever they call their app store, go download the No House Advantage app, use the promo code Awesemo to get a $20 match on your first deposit. Who are some of the other No House Advantage players here that stand out to you, either from an over and under prop, somebody we haven't talked about yet?
So I pulled up the over because it seems like we're focusing on some of the unders. One of the guys that is a guy that you liked more than me, and it looks like the boss is well on your side on this one. Eric Bledsoe jumping up with a points plus assists of 12.5. Alex has him going pretty nicely through that with a 15.6 projection. Coming up about 76% of the time as hitting that over. Is that something you like now that we know that Lonzo's not going to go?
Yeah, and like I said, I like him for DFS. I got to him in my DraftKings lineups. Less of a priority for me on FanDuel, but it's still. I mean, we look at Eric Bledsoe and where he's priced. He is priced on both No House Advantage, on FanDuel, DraftKings, everywhere. He is priced under the assumption that Lonzo Ball was going to be in the lineup. People didn't set prices ahead of time, assuming that Lonzo is going to be out. So he's too cheap everywhere, and that includes his props being too low. So yeah, I like the over on everything, Eric Bledsoe. Am I confident in him? No, because I'm the only person on the planet who still likes Eric Bledsoe, which means what? It means I've rostered him in DFS, which means that sometimes it's gone well. Sometimes it has not gone well at all. This is going to be one of the days I'm on him again. But I understand there's variance there. So I do like the overs, but I would say this, I wouldn't put it as a high confidence number. So like we're talking about how Noah's advantage works, any props you pick, you give them a number 1 to 10, and then you build a lineup card with 10 different props. And based on how high of a points you score, if you win on that, that's how many points you get for that individual prop. So Eric Bledsoe, I wouldn't put him as a high confidence interval prop, right? He'd be somebody who I'd give to like a 3 or 4 points. Like I wouldn't go throw in Eric Bledsoe as like an 8 or 9 because I know that it goes poorly sometimes with Eric Bledsoe. So, low confidence.
So, but just to game that out a little bit, don't you think that might be how everybody's approaching Eric Bledsoe? So maybe we gain a little bit knowing that we're so high on him in the situation. The public might not be as high on him, and they might not be rostering him with nearly as much confidence. Do you think we gain a little bit by moving him up that board a little bit? Maybe not to the 8 to 10s, but maybe to the 6s or 7s as opposed to like the 3s and 4s.
Not really, just because there's so many props. Like we talked about the Blake Griffin props. Those
how many props were there?
500. So like not 50, not like 10x 50. So not 100, not 200, 500 props. So we have so many to choose from, and the ones that we have projected have a really high percentage chance of hitting. Like we said, Blake Griffin. And by the way, you can only pick one prop for each individual player, but Blake Griffin, we talked about his props have an over 90% chance of hitting. Kendrick Nunn, we have projected those props over a 90% chance of hitting. The under on Elfrid Payton props, those have about a 90% chance of hitting. So if we just assume that these ones are very likely to hit, like there's no advantage gained by just giving a higher confidence interval to Eric Bledsoe because I expect all of these to hit anyway. So I would just think of these almost as like Caris LeVert the other day when he's priced at 3,900. That's how I'm viewing the Blake Griffin props. So I just say give these the highest kind of confidence interval, and just not enough of a projection for me to go like super high with Eric Bledsoe. Does that follow?
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense.
All right. Some other players here.
What do you make of the Covington rebound prop? That's the second highest in the overs. 6.5. Alex has it at 7.99.
So that is, I was lower on Covington for the day than Alex was. So I'd assume I wouldn't like it as much, although I still have him over 6.5 rebounds. I wouldn't have it. I don't figure out my projections in the same way I'm figuring out the odds of everybody being over, but just based on my projection compared to Covington's, I would say I probably have a slight lean towards the over, but not the 77% number that Alex has. I'd probably be something like 60% over on Robert Covington. So yeah, if I had to pick one of those props and I had a lean, I would go towards the over, but there's other props on the board I like more than Covington. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, I was looking at him mostly the same way throughout the day, and I expect that my if I had broken it out like that, my rebounding prop would be slightly less than Alex's as well. A guy who in general grabs 22.7% of their team's rebounds, 26.7 on the defensive end, only 10.4 on the offensive end, but we already talked about Enes Kanter sucking up just all the offensive rebounds for them. So it's an interesting spot, but I was a little bit lower, and I would have a little less confidence than Alex as well.
So we've got I see our Slack chat has really turned on Aaron Gordon quickly, but here's what they don't know. Here's what they don't know about Aaron Gordon. The way the Magic's rotation works, Aaron Gordon comes out at the first whistle. He comes out at the first commercial break. So it's really hard for him to score fantasy points when he isn't on the court. So yeah, Aaron Gordon got off to a quick start. And the reason he hasn't scored fantasy points since then is because he isn't playing, but no fears. He checks back in relatively soon. I know, because that's how the Magic rotation work. But yeah, I wouldn't get too worried when your players don't score fantasy points when they're on the bench. Let's look at what are some of these Montrez Harrell props? Is there anything here that, Or how about Kyle Kuzma? Because now that we have some of this Lakers news being changed, Kyle Kuzma, actually one of the players who projects for one of the stronger over numbers. Kyle Kuzma, over under 1.5 3-pointers. I feel pretty comfortably he's going to hit the over there. Just all the extra usage going to him with both Anthony Davis and LeBron James being out of the lineup. So Kyle Kuzma, I like the over there. How confident are you in Kyle Kuzma hitting at least 2 threes?
Yeah, I think given the extra usage that he should see, like you said, he's shooting 37% from three this season, 33.7% for his career, which is a little bit more concerning. But assuming that he takes 5-6 of them, I think we should have no problem making 2 of them.
Yeah, and I think, it's just the other thing too, like I was saying, there's so much usage available to him. He's going to get so many shot attempts up. I have Kuzma project for almost 3 3-pointers tonight, and I'm just going to bring up what we've seen from him as a starter so far this year in the limited starts that we've seen. Kyle Kuzma, his last start the other day, 2 threes. Start before that, game against the Kings, 4 threes. Starts before that, the Wizards, 4 threes, 4 threes, 2 threes. So of the starts he's made this year, it looks like he only has 2 starts all year out of his 12 where he didn't hit at least 2 3-pointers. So all the more reason to be pretty confident in Kyle Kuzma hitting multiple 3-pointers in this game. So
yeah, and just looking back over the last few games, 8 attempted, 5 attempted, 10 attempted, 4, 5, 6, 10. He's taking the threes. So yeah, he should have no problem blasting right through that 1.5 prop.
All right, let's see. We've got about 2 minutes until the No House Advantage contest locks. And guys, don't forget, if you go sign up for No House Advantage using the promo code Awesemo, you get a $20 match deposit on the first deposit you make at No House Advantage. And they do have a $10,000 prize pool today, $5,000 to first place. I don't have access to No House Advantage from New Jersey, so I can't check the numbers to see how close it is to filling, but there's a chance that there is going to be overlay. If that is the case, there's no better value in all of DFS than overlay. So go download the No House Advantage app and definitely want to go check that out. Any final thoughts on props? We only have about 30 seconds here until lock. And probably by the time you even bring this up, the contest will have already locked by the time the public hears it.
Fire away on Blake Griffin with your most confident spot. I was just clicking through some of the pages on our optimal lineups pages. You have to go 13 pages deep, and there's like 25 lineups per page, something like that, before you find the lineup with Blake out of that first 10 spot. So free square on the highest confidence spot with Blake Griffin.
All right, guys, that is going to wrap up the show, but the content doesn't end here. Even though the basketball slate is locked, I'm still going to be around later in the night to talk about the late slate live before lock. I'll be doing that with Spags. And then also, guys, don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already done that. And also, we do have NBA player projections. Those are free on Awesemo.com. PGA ownership projections, those are also free. So if you're building PGA lineups for the slate that locks like egregiously early in the morning, then I would definitely recommend going to check that out. So Jordan, play us out, and don't forget to come back in a couple hours when I'm here with Spags.
Good stuff.